I don't know why this isn't obvious.
So don't be mistaken and take my words very carefully. Hamas is committing a crime against this generation and the next generations to come. So blaming Israel is not going to solve the problem, with one intention in mind: to annihilate the state of Israel. This is Hamas' primary goal.
It's important to understand, and one of the things I don't think many Americans reflect on is that there's the Jewish faith, and then there is the
Israeli government.
That's
right.
They are not the same thing.
Right.
Look, I grew up in South Africa. I'll share this with you. I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in apartheid.
Welcome out to God and Country. Again, I'm Uriah Kennedy, and this is
Ingrid Bettridge.
We are here from episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about Israel and the difference between Israel, the country, and Judaism, the religion. We're also going to get quite a bit into the predicaments with Hamas. We have a great guest on with us, live here from Chicago. We want to welcome Selwyn Gordon. Selwyn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Amazing.
Amazing, perfect. Well, Selwyn, kind of give yourself a little quick introduction of who you are, where you come from, and why you think you're an authority on Israel.
Well, I was born in South Africa. Grew up till the age of 20. I lived in South Africa then. I had been to Israel once before with my parents, and from 6 days of just touring around, I just said to myself, I have to go back and try live there. So I went there at the age of 21, went to school. Unfortunately, I left when I was 20, after 5 years of studying there, and went back to South Africa because I wanted to do my master's in South Africa in exercise physiology. And then I came to America to do my master's, but I always thought I'd go back there one day. And then, I got married here in America, met an American woman, and, we started having kids, and I've got 2 kids that are living there. And I always go back to visit because I know one day I'm going to go back there, at the end of my life. So that's just part of my, once I lived there, I followed it intensely. I still follow everything that goes on a daily basis. I watch on YouTube, all the latest TV shows to understand news shows, really what's going on there. So I've just got a connection to the country, and that's just the way I am. I'm one of those people who has this inner love for Israel.
I understand you have family over there as well still. What's going on with your children over there?
Yes. I mean, to just tell a quick story, when October 7 happened, we were at synagogue in Chicago, and straight after the Chag, the festival came out, we quickly looked at our phones to find out what happened, and then my son texted me and he said, we fine. He was actually going to go on a trip, and he said we were called back to he's learning in yeshiva, and we're told that we have to, stay in the yeshiva, but we're fine, and we're supposed to do more learning and praying for the soldiers, because from what we understand, there's some sort of attack on the country, but we're all fine. And then I mean, we changed our lives. Like just to give you a quick overview, as a community in Chicago, an hour later, the whole community went to this central place, and we all started saying psalms for the people of Israel. We still didn't quite know exactly what happened, um, and um, and I've got a very close friend who lived in Chicago, who lives in near Jerusalem, and I texted him and asked him what happened, and it was just it's just I guess it's in our hearts, like we just think of the people in Israel, what they're going through. So as someone who lived there, I was there when it was pretty quiet, things were quiet. So I was there from 87 to 92. I think the worst thing that happened was the Gulf War, and the Intifada started. But relatively it was quiet. So, but you still have this like thought of like, what are the regular people doing there? What are guys that I went to school with doing? Like, now, some people, I'm in my 50s, so had probably sent their kids to the army, and what's going on. So, as this goes along, I'll tell you some, real stories of people that, what they went through. And I guess you learn a lot. That's why you get so connected, is because they're regular people. They're not like super fighters or things like that. They're people that have to pick up their guns and in like a few hours report to the army, instead of going to work. So that's like a big change in your life and in your family life.
Well, we really
And
don't have that here in the United States. We're not having
no,
to all of a sudden go and grab our guns because somebody's attacking our homeland. I mean, that's not anything that anybody here in the United States has ever experienced. I mean, all our wars have always been foreign. And
right.
to have to face that where you're literally going to your closets, you got your kids, you have a normal work schedule that you're used to, taking your kids to school, taking them to daycare, whatever it is you're doing, and all of a sudden you're going from a normal life to we're being attacked, that people are dying. What are we supposed to do? And you're picking up your guns and trying to defend your family, like right then and there in your own neighborhoods, amongst your neighbors. And a lot of people here in the United States are just not picturing themselves there. They take what we have here in the United States for granted, that we have the security, we have the safety.
We're pretty spoiled.
Pretty spoiled. And particularly when you're seeing that the protests are going up right now in New York and stuff like that, and they're
have no
chanting
idea.
"River to the sea," and they have no idea what river, what sea, or what they're chanting about. They don't understand the history of that, what is actually going on over there. And that's what we want to kind of dive into.
I love how the first reaction, though, was to go to prayer. That's such a great example, to go to our higher power for help and for aid. I really admire you for that.
Well, I mean, it was actually, we heard about it because at our synagogue we've got an armed guard who's not Jewish, from a private company. So I remember I walked into the synagogue that day, and a good friend of mine who's like a greeter, he stands there with the guard, I said, how's it going? And I mean, this is one of the happiest festivals. It's the end of the high holidays. It's Simchat Torah. It's like you just pure happiness. You're coming with your kids and you're dancing with the Jewish Torah, with the Torah, and you're supposed to be just pure happiness. And you hear things aren't good. There was an attack on Israel, and at the time he said like 500 people were killed. And I'm like, how can I go now and dance? I mean, so the first, actually, what happened, I'm sorry, I'm going, on this
Well,
experience.
first off,
It was so powerful.
why don't you explain this holiday for all of us who are not Jewish and what exactly happens with this holiday? And I'm positive that Hamas knew what was going on. They were aware of the holiday, right? And that's probably obviously
Yeah,
the
so
reason why they chose that day to have that attack, if I'm correct.
yeah. So I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna make a statement, and then I'm gonna tell you about it. I think that every anti-Semitic group that wants to try and destroy us are not stupid, and they know when to attack, and they know when we're weak, and that comes from the Bible. So because and it comes and I'll leave it at that, and then as we go along, we'll there's proofs. So that's really when they attack because and in 73 the Egyptians attacked us on Yom Kippur. Why? Because even non-religious Jews are going to go to synagogue on the holiest day, and and it's a time where we off guard in a sense. We're not expecting to be attacked because we think it's our holiest day. Why would someone attack us, right? So this is at the end of the holidays that start with Rosh Hashanah, which is, and Yom Kippur, which are the two holy days where, the end of the year where we come and ask for forgiveness, and then, we look back at our year and we sort of reflect and try and you know, ask for forgiveness, and then, get close to God. And we're not, and by the way, we're not praying just for the Jews, praying for the world. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, and then after Yom Kippur, we have the holiday about 3 or 4 days later called Sukkot, where um, basically we're sitting there and we've come out, we've sort of got closer to God, and then God, instead of at a time where the weather's starting to get cold and it's now fall, so we go and we build these huts and we go out and be closer to God and spend time with Him intimately outdoors in these huts, these sukkot. Um, and then the final day of that festival is called Simchat Torah, and I'm not doing it justice because I'm not a rabbi, but it's a time of just pure joy, where you take your children and your grandchildren, and you take the Torah, which is our what's in the middle of the Jewish people. That's what we stand for, and that's what we've had over the years. It's what we received from God. So it's sort of our document that we live by, and we dance with it because there's so much joy of living a life where we connected to God through the Torah, and that's what it is, and that's what we were doing on that day, in different ways. I mean, some people weren't maybe in synagogue, and some people were. It doesn't really matter. It was a time of joy for the Jewish people. I think also it was a time, where there was unfortunately division in Israel, but for the most part, it should be a time of where we all come together. It doesn't matter, what your background is and what type of Jew you are. You put and this is how you actually dance. You put the Torah in the middle, and you dance around it. So it's like symmetrical, and you all have a part of it. That's what it means. Doesn't matter how religious or how rabbinical you are. So it's a beautiful, beautiful festival, and it's supposed to be just a festival of pure joy. And on a personal level, I had my grandchild with me on my shoulders, and every year I used to dance with a certain kid on my shoulders, and it was just it's special, beautiful, and you finish this festival and you feel good about yourself, about your family, and about your relationship with God, and that's sort of what it was. But obviously not October 7th, 2023. And yeah, they knew we were at a weak point, and that's when they attacked. And that's what people who really want to destroy the Jews know how to do, is they know where our weak point is, and they know when to attack.
And that's just a sad thing about it. But I think the rest of the world kind of lets that happen. I mean, you go to the UN and they argue against Israel for defending themselves, for putting up walls, for putting up barriers. And for some reason, ever since World War II, ever since England passed Israel off to the Jewish people, there's been handcuffs on them for some reason. They're not letting them be their own country. Because if these similar things would have happened to any other country in the world, and war would have broken out, just like it has broken out with between Israel and Hamas, the rest of the world wouldn't have said anything. It would have been, yes, they have the right to defend themselves. I mean, look how the rest of the world defends Ukraine for Russia having attacked Ukraine. We don't see that same support for Israel when Hamas attacks Israel for some reason. Why isn't Israel treated like every other country out there? Why is there something special where everybody thinks that, well, Israel's a nation but not really a nation and can't really protect themselves? It's boggles my mind to think of that and understand, well, why are these world leaders treating Israel like that? Now, the United States has always backed Israel, and we've backed it more and more and more over the years and increased our support for Israel. Obviously, we sell a lot of weapons, a lot of airplanes, almost everything our military has, we sell over to Israel so that Israel can defend themselves. And then you guys have probably one of the greatest armies out there because you've been attacked so many times and have won every single time. I mean, you go back to the 6-Day War that happened not too long ago, where you defeated Egypt once, you defeated Iran once, and every single time they try to attack, Israel proves that they're stronger. But at the same time, the rest of the world is like almost condemning Israel for defending themselves. And now we get these huge comments about, well, Hamas was here first, or the Muslim population was here first. And it's really on, well, how far back in history do you want to go? Because they weren't there first. Kind of, what's your opinion on how the world treats Israel versus other countries here?
Well, it's very simple. I think it's all sort of part of this anti-Semitism, I believe. In other words, we can't win the battle of public opinion. When we didn't have our own country, we were, every time there was, we can go back in history, we can see why did my grandparents land up in South Africa? Because there were pogroms where they killed Jews. They just went into villages and cities and decided to attack the Jews, right? Because we were separate. It's not that we were against the government. We lived by the rules, but we wanted to be. Had our own wanted to stick with our own communities. But we paid our taxes. We did what we were supposed to do. Except, that when there was a problem, they sort of blamed the Jews. And going back to the 1400s, and this is like unbelievable. We were kicked out of countries. We were allowed back. My wife's family was from Greece. So how did Jews get to Greece? They came through Spain, because at one point the Inquisition, they kicked them out of Spain. So in saying that, it's all grounded in some form of anti-Semitism. Depends, there are different forms of it, I think. Some's more hidden than others. Except, like, what makes me laugh about what you're saying about the UN is, I remember as a kid, there was a guy in charge of the UN. His name was Kurt Waldheim. And I laughed, and I thought, with a name like that, how could he be even killed? He must be a Nazi. And that was me as a little kid. Well, years later, they did a background check on the guy finally, and they found out he was an Austrian guard at one of the camps. You can't make this stuff up. They had a guy from Egypt. So the UN has been a joke since its implementation, and I just feel that Israel will never, and this is one thing that Israel has to stop doing, apologizing for all the action that they take, because to me, that's the apology allows these people to keep bashing them. We should never apologize for defending ourselves. We should never apologize for being a country that brings so many things to the world, um, culture and technology and all these things that we could help other countries, and sometimes they don't want our help, like how we've taken a country that was a total desert and desolate and built it into an unbelievable, flourishing country. Have you ever had fruit and vegetables from Israel? It's the best in the world. I can't eat that stuff in America. Okay. I used to like, I say this to my family every day, like, you should taste the stuff in Israel. It's so fresh and real. Okay. That's we don't have to apologize for anything. We don't need the United Nations as well. It's a total joke. It's an absolute joke. And Bibi Netanyahu has told them many times when he was the UN rep, and it's just like, I don't even know why they're part of the UN. Maybe they get money from the UN. Who the heck knows? But I think it's a joke. And I'm hoping the Trump administration just sort of closes it down and sends the guys home, because they're wasting taxpayer dollars on that whole building. Like, he can build a hotel there for all I care.
Well, it's an interesting thing that you're saying about South Africa. To kind of tell you a little bit about my history, my grandma, my dad's mother, she's actually 100% Jewish. Both sides of her family, all the way back. I've done the genealogy on her, and she's got like 7 rabbis going back. And so if we go back, we go back to Russia during the time of Stalin and Fiddler on the Roof. And everybody knows the persecution that the Jews faced during the time of Stalin and during the time of Russia. And so right before things got bad, I guess her family made a good decision to leave Russia. Because you look at the year they left Russia, and it was like a year, 2 years later that slaughters began to happen, and they were actually forced out of Russia. So I mean, her family was very, very prudent at leaving. And part of her family went to England, part of her family went to Germany. And then from England, they actually went down to South Africa. So it'd be interesting to see if you and I have some relation there somewhere, because I have a lot of distant cousins that actually moved to South Africa. In fact, one of them is a guy that created the symphony orchestra for the country of South Africa. He's related to me, and I think the symphony orchestra down there in South Africa is still alive and well, and he's the one that actually started that.
Wow.
My grandmother's family then moved to the United States, and then from there they went down to Alabama, where they all are at now. And she told us stories of how she grew up, and her family was practicing Jewish. She kind of fell away from the Jewish faith in college, and then later converted to Christianity, which is where I come from. But she told us that during her youth, she would grow up and she'd practice every holiday, all that. During that, she'd practice Passover. She had actually shown us how to do the Passover and stuff like that, but before she converted to Christianity. And her last name is actually Reidelbach. And then the part of the family that went to Germany, they did the same thing. They kind of saw the writing on the wall, and like literally before Hitler, or like right when Hitler joined the army and was actually part of the army, before he even started making any type of waves, they left Germany as well, and also traveled down to South Africa. So we've got pretty extensive distant cousins that all went down to South Africa and kind of tried to escape that, but then you have the apartheid going on down in South Africa, so they didn't survive it very much longer. But so I have that Jewish blood in me. I mean, I'm a quarter Jew. My father's side, we're Scottish from the Kennedy side, going back to Scotland, and then my mother's side, we're English and Irish. So, but her side, she's 100% Jewish. So I understand the sentiment coming from there. Just growing up with her and her telling us the stories about how she would grow up. But I also understand why you're down in South Africa, why many of the Jewish faith went down to South Africa. But once England set up Israel and made Israel so you guys were your own country, the rest of the world should have gotten behind that, including the UN and everybody else. But they just don't seem to be giving Israel the same credence as every other nation out there. And now you have Hamas saying that and even Ilhan Omar and other of our politicians saying that you're occupiers and you're occupying their land, which I don't see how they could possibly say that you're occupying their land. Because, I mean, as this podcast, I mean, we're God and country, and we're trying to bring God back into society and bring that discussion of God back into society. And so, coming from my Christian background, I know that the Jewish people were the holy people of God. I mean, that is what Christians believe. That's what the Jews believe, that you, as a Jewish people, you're the chosen people. And it's always been that way from the early stages of the Bible. I mean, if you go back, clear back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I mean, Abraham escaped the Syrian area because he was going to get sacrificed by his own father, and went down and established Salem, which later became Jerusalem. And then it went passed down to Isaac and then to Jacob. And as we know, Joseph got sold into Egypt, and their entire family moved down to Egypt, which kind of let that land go. About 400 years later, you got Moses that's bringing them back, and they reestablished their nation. And you have King David, you have King Solomon, you have Saul, and the 12 tribes of Israel established a very, very powerful nation, one of the most powerful nations that were there, especially during the times of King David and King Solomon. And then where things kind of get lost is during the reigns of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, where the northern kingdom of what was known as the 10 tribes get conquered and scattered all over the world. And that's where I come from. I'm sure that's where England comes from, is one of those 10 tribes. And then you have the lower kingdom, which was the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin that established that. And you have current-day Baghdad, which is the
Babylonians.
The Babylonians, yeah. The Babylonians came in and conquered you guys and took you guys away captive. But later released to come back and establish the country again. In fact, the king of Babylonia put up all the money that was necessary to rebuild the Temple Mount. And the Jewish nation was again established, clear until the Romans took over. And then you have the time of Christ when Jesus was born, and the Jewish people were under Roman occupation there. And then probably, about, what was it, 90 years, 100 years after Jesus was born, where the Romans came down again and just destroyed everything, dismantled the temple down to every last stone, to where only thing that was left is the current day Wailing Wall.
Right.
And then the Jewish nation, the tribe of Judah, was then scattered all over the world again. And that's where you have that people going up into Russia, where, like I said, my grandmother comes from, and then all over Europe, Spain. And that's the way it was. Poland, that's the way it was up until World War II, when obviously Hitler arises and you have the Holocaust. And then England.
Right. Can I interject there, Uriah?
Go ahead.
Just to add, you're saying, I know you're giving like a historical analysis for years, and very impressive, your knowledge, because I don't think many people know, and I'm saying many, I don't know what Christians like. I don't know how strongly Christian you are, but I'm saying the regular guy in the street doesn't know the history like you do. But what I want to add is that we were always a nation. It was while we lost the temple and we lost, living in the right to govern the land of Israel, we always still pointed. We had our prayers, we had our written, we had our oral law, which is part of what we received at Sinai. So we kept, and we had our scholarship, and we had our tradition. So that kept Judaism going. It was always, passed down to the next generation. And we always had these scholars that kept making sure that our religion would stay strong. And we had issues. I'm not going to tell you it was all, great. We had issues, and we had people coming and leading us astray, etc., etc. We could go on, and I don't want to waste this whole show on that. But we always pointed to one place, which was the land of Israel. And we still, even though we might have been a few minorities, we still had people living there. And if you go to Israel, you might meet some person living in Jerusalem who will say, my family are, let's say in Hebrew, they say Yerushalmi. They've been here for tons of generations. I once hosted a rabbi who lived in the old city, and he was there for the 48 war. He's there as a kid, and his 48 War of Independence, and then he was there for the 6 Day War in '67, and I mean, we've always been there, maybe as a minority, but that's where we've pointed to. Even though we've lived in all these, lands that you've mentioned, we've had communities all over the place. Ashkenazi, Sephardi, North African, Eastern European, everywhere. But we've always pointed to Israel, to the land of Israel. That's always been our focus.
And it should be your land. I mean, that's the way it's always been. It should be your land, and the rest of the world should be trying to take that from you. So, and the reason why I pointed out that history is because now you've got Hamas saying that you're occupiers taking their land, and it's just not true. That is just an absolute drawn out lie, and most of the world is not recognizing the lie that it is.
Right.
It is not their land. It has never been their land. They've never had a nation. They've never had a state. It's never been theirs, ever. And there hasn't been a single point in history where the Palestinian people, where that land belonged to Palestinian people. In fact, they didn't even call themselves a Palestinian people till, what was it, the 50s or the 60s? That the word Palestinian came into play?
Yasser Arafat. And, there is a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan. That's the truth. The people that live in the West Bank and the Gaza were people. They were they were, because of the war, the two wars, the 6 Day War and the 73 War, where we conquered that land. So instead of saying to those countries, we're taking the land, we're going to annex the land, it's going to be now Israel, and we're going to send these people back to you because their passports were Jordanian in the West Bank, and in Gaza they were Egyptian. So instead, we took an approach which was an approach of let's live in peace. And that in the Middle East is a form of weakness. When you say to a Middle Eastern Arab, let's live in peace, they think, okay, they obviously are weak. We got to try conquer them. And that's like every time. I mean, we could find clips for tons of them about Israeli leaders saying consistently that we want to live in peace. We want to live in peace. We just want peace. We want to live in peace with you, our partners, our neighbors, whoever they are, the Arabs in Egypt, in Jordan, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres with the Palestinians, so-called Palestinians. We just want to live in peace. We want our kids to grow up and live in peace. Okay? So my point is that that's a form of weakness, because every time you say that, they say, okay, now we can conquer them, because they want to give up. They're prepared to give up land. It's just not the way me and you would think. If someone walked up to your neighbor and said, you know what, if you let's say you're throwing rocks at each other because you're disputing some land, and then he says to you, know what, let's split the land up in half and let's live in peace. Let's befriend each other, and let's I personally would do it because I don't want to throw rocks. I don't want to walk out of my house in a bad mood. I don't want to have a fight. I'd rather, walk out and have a smile on my face and say I like the guy next door because he's a good guy. We can trust each other. Does like that make sense? To me, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know about you.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about there, and we're actually going to get into a couple of clips that we're going to put on here where the son of the gentleman that founded or the co-founder of Hamas actually says that exact same thing, that you can't go to the Arab nations and these Muslim countries and say, hey, I just want peace, because they see that as weakness. They see that, well, now is the time to attack. They don't believe in that word peace, because to them it's everybody dies, everybody follows us, or nothing. They won't accept anything less than that.
And that's because they don't want peace. They want the Jews to be obliterated,
Well,
to no longer exist. That's their objective.
right. So I'll tell you another quick story I had when I lived in Israel. I was there for the Gulf War, the first Gulf War with Saddam. And, we're in our sealed rooms. The Scuds came over, the American Patriots didn't really knock a lot of them out, but thank God, there was one death, but none of them was from a direct strike from the Scuds. So it was like a miracle in a sense. Anyway, it was the war ended on a day called Purim, which is another happy day in the Jewish history that we celebrate. And I remember a few days later, I went running with a friend, with a guy who was in his 50s, an older guy that I used to run with on a Friday afternoon. And he was a veteran of many wars. And I said to him, isn't this great? Like, doesn't this feel good? Like we can do this again. We don't have to worry about scuds and gas masks. And he said to me, Bush made a big mistake. I said to Micha, what, you crazy? We got them. They done. He said, let me tell you something. Saddam's going to go back to his people. He's going to tell them they won the war, and then they're going to have to go back in and destroy him. And he said, every war that the Israelis won, the leaders, a few years later, they would go back to their people and say, we won the war, and the people would believe them. And that's just the way they think, because Israel always would say, okay, we accept the ceasefire, let's talk about some sort of deal. And he said that's unfortunately the mistake of the world. Is like I'm not saying they should go and destroy these people, but when they see that weakness of like, let's figure this out, it just becomes like a sign of weakness. It gives them another sort of, you got them in a chokehold. You got to show them that you're stronger than them, and that's just the way it is. I wish it was different, but it's just the way it is.
And I think that's what Netanyahu's trying to do right now. He's trying to completely
Yeah.
obliterate Hamas. And let's
Well,
get into a couple of these clips we have waiting here. So,
let's go. Yeah.
as the United States, I mean, obviously we were a born Christian country. Our founding fathers were Christian, and in fact, you couldn't even run for office during that initial time in the United States without professing a religion of some kind. So, as a Christian country, we have a special place in our hearts for the Jewish people. And a lot of people in the United States support Israel because of the Jewish faith. And there's a lot of people now in the government are trying to separate Israel, the country, Israel, the government, from Judaism, the faith, and trying
Right.
not to equate anti-Semitism with not supporting a lot of the government decisions, but still supporting the Jewish faith itself. And I think our support, like I said, from the entire nation of the United States and all of us who are Christian here in the United States, we have a great support for Israel. And it comes back to our faith and our belief in God that the Jewish people are a chosen people of God, and that's the way it should be. So we're going to thank the Danny Jones show I'm taking a clip off of his podcast of the two ex-CIA officers that are kind of having this same discussion. Now, we're not supporting or defending any of their opinions. It's just a point of discussion that we're going to have here. And that's all we want to do is bring this out in the open and just kind of have a discussion where they're talking about the difference between Israel, the country, and Judaism, the faith. So let me cue this up.
It's important to understand, and one of the things I don't think many Americans reflect on is that there's the Jewish faith, and then there is the
Israeli government.
Israeli government.
That's right.
They are not the same thing.
Right.
And in the United States, what we're trying to promote and protect is the preservation and protection of the Jewish faith.
Yes.
But what unfortunately happens is that a lot of, especially Jewish people who are American citizens, get confused even between the idea of the Jewish faith and the nation of Israel, the state, recognized government, political state of Israel, right? They're not the same thing. So Israel as a country, as a government, with its own security infrastructure, with its own national priorities, economic, national security, and otherwise, makes decisions as a nation that doesn't separate church and state, but a nation nevertheless. We, on the other end here, are still confused about whether or not rejecting Israeli policy is the same thing as anti-Semitism.
That's a good point. That's an important point. And that's a relatively new phenomenon, too. We actually didn't. But then if you look at administration after administration going back to 1948, you can see how drastically American policy has changed. And I think it's because we struggle with that issue of equating Israel with Judaism. And, really never the two shall meet.
Right. So
in U.S. policy.
So Netanyahu's execution of wartime policy, which is like outside of legal requirements, and he dissolved his war cabinet. Like he's an army of one right now, basically, right? With his whole
Did he get rid of that one guy, Benny
Gantz left on his own.
Benny Gantz left on his own, but Itamar Ben-Gvir is still very much there.
That's what I'm talking about, Gvir. Ben
And
Gvir.
so is Smotrich.
Julian was telling me about Ben Gvir, saying that guy is like
This guy
Satan.
There's
he has felony convictions for anti-Muslim hate crimes. That's how bad this is. He's a convicted hate crime felon.
And he had apparently he's the guy who had like a portrait of this guy, a terrorist who like blew up some sort of mosque.
The cave of the patriarchs.
Yes, exactly.
Had his portrait hanging in his living room.
So I think there's absolutely a stranglehold in the United States about the topic of Judaism and protecting Judaism and safeguarding Judaism, especially knowing that Israel is a safe haven for Jews in an ocean of Islam on both sides, right? Sunni and Shia Islam. So there's definitely an element of that. And then there is a strong current of wealthy Jewish money, wealthy Jewish lobbyists, wealthy Jewish entertainers, wealthy Jewish everything. Just like there's wealthy Christians and wealthy Muslims and wealthy Buddhists, everything, right? There's an influence that comes from those benefactors in the United States that we also confuse with thinking that we have to support Israel to support them. But there's also a very real strategic benefit from supporting Israel. We just don't have to support Israel and their policies under Netanyahu in how they execute
blindly.
Against Hamas.
No.
It's about Iran, and it's about Iran's efforts to execute proxy conflict in all directions around Israel. That's what it's really about. Following the red herring that says that it's about Hamas. It's not about Hamas.
It's not about Hamas.
And Hamas is an idea that, unfortunately, with every new Palestinian that you kill, all you're doing is guaranteeing another generation of people who believe in Hamas. The Fatah government has now shaken hands with Hamas and been like,
but the Israeli government drove them to that.
It's crazy.
Abbas is so easily attacked. I mean, this is a guy that's 18 years into a 4-year term as president, right? He's a buffoon. He's corrupt. He's mentally degraded, and the Israelis have pushed him into the arms of Hamas.
Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible.
So on October 6th, the legitimate government for the Palestinians was the Fatah government, even though the West Bank was controlled by Hamas. And now here we stand in July of 2024, and the two
August.
August. Thank
August
you.
3rd.
And now where we stand is that both Gaza and the West Bank have met on equal grounds.
Yeah.
So the legitimate government that even Israel was saying was legitimate government is now legitimizing Hamas, which is labeled a terrorist organization by 13 of the UN states, which means only 13 members of the UN, which has more than 100 members. Only 13 identify Hamas as terrorists.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And, another thing, too, is a lot of Americans either forget or don't know that Benjamin Netanyahu is the most unpopular major political figure in Israel. The latest polls just come out last week show his approval rating at 22%.
They've called for re-election. Wildly unpopular.
Oh, yeah.
Even before October 7th, wildly unpopular. Yeah, he's got fraud charges on him, criminal charges on him, corruption charges on him. He's been in and out of office multiple
bribery,
times.
influence peddling.
So it's not.
And Gantz only slightly higher. When's that from? May.
There is no, I don't know how to overstate this. Israel is not a trusted, close friend of the United States.
In any way.
Not in any way.
Listen, Israel, when I was at the agency, and granted my information's 20 years old now, but when I was at the agency, Israel was classified as critical threat for counterintelligence. So it was Israel, Russia, North Korea, and Cuba. That's how serious.
Not China?
And China, yes. That's how serious the spy threat is against us from Israel.
The problem is they are also militarily, economically, industrially, very practical to have as allies. And then on top of that, you have our commitment to the Jewish faith and the protection and preservation of the Jewish faith.
So we want to just pause there, and because I think we get too far in there and not be able to discuss everything that's already been discussed. So, I mean, he made a lot of points there. I want to kind of get your opinion on. One is the difference between Israel, the country, and Judaism, the religion, and the other thing was. Not obviously. I want to discuss your opinion on Netanyahu himself and and how is that poll real? Is he really not have that big of a following over there? Because as far as what we can see here in the United States, he's doing a great job. And then obviously they're talking about the security issues because Israel has a lot of spies here in the United States. And that may be true. And I think if that is true, the reason that Israelis are having a lot of spies here is they just want to make sure they have all the technology that they could possibly have and take advantage of that because obviously they're trying to protect themselves. So let's go first into the difference between Israel, the country, and Judaism, the religion. Obviously, Israel does not have a separation of church and state, and I don't necessarily think that we have to separate Judaism, the religion, from Israeli, the government. But just like in Christianity, I mean, we have Christians that claim to be Christian, but are not necessarily following Christianity by any stretch of the imagination. They may go to Mass on Christmas and Easter, and that's maybe it, and claim Christianity. And I know there's Jewish people that claim to be Jews or Jewish and not necessarily practicing the religion, and some of those people may be the people making decisions within the government, and the decisions they make may not always be the best for the faith or for Israel, the country. A lot of times they'll make decisions out of anger or spite or revenge, and again, I don't profess to know any and all of those answers, but kind of go through what's your opinion on that.
It's not a simple answer, but I'll try to simplify it. Because when Israel was founded, it wasn't founded by religious Jews. It was founded by a very secular group. The idea of Zionism was because all these people in Eastern Europe were saying we always, whatever it is, every few years we're getting kicked out, we're getting persecuted. So let's go to the land that, Israel. Now, how did they figure out Israel? It's all from the Bible. So they couldn't have just, at one point they were offered Uganda. and they had a vote, and the vote was no, Israel. So people, the world understood that the Jews, they needed a homeland because they were getting persecuted. So I guess that's how they got to Israel. Now, it was founded by secular Jews, but then there was always, once again, as I said before, your heart always points to Israel as a Jew. As a religious Jew, as a secular, whatever, somehow your heart always points to Israel. That's the belief. So, is it that basically what they're saying was you could bash Israel, but that doesn't mean you're an anti-Semite. Okay, so that's the biggest lot of garbage I've ever heard. Firstly, today in Israel, eventually, the religious Jews will be a majority. I don't know when, but they are the growing population. Different forms of religious Jews, and that could be a whole discussion, you know. So that's number one. Number two is, even if you are secular Israeli, you have some background in Judaism. It's you understand that you come from Judaism. That's your religion. Okay. So if you say, well, we can't really, we can defend Judaism, but we can bash Israel. It's to me one and the same kind. They can't make that argument, and they can't understand what Israel's going through, being in the middle of the Middle East, because they're trying to think in terms of America. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that, and Israel has to be so on top of things when it comes to their military and their spying and all that. And you see what happens when they have one lapse. They have a massacre of 1,500 people in almost one day, because there are millions of Arabs that want to destroy us. So for them to start making these stupid comments is ridiculous. It's like they sound like idiots, and I guess, the way they're talking, it's like sort of talking points that they're taking. Now, so therefore, you can't separate your religion and Israel, okay? You can try to do it for a period of time, but eventually, even someone who says, I'm not a Zionist, who's a religious Jew, who's not a Zionist, he will still be praying for the health of his brothers that live in Israel. It's just the way it is. That's what happens in our synagogue. Our rabbi is not known to be a Zionist, but when we say always Psalms after our prayers, because we're thinking of our brothers and sisters in Israel, wherever they are. So whatever they said was garbage. I don't buy any of that. The second thing on Netanyahu, listen, the politics in Israel is, you can't. There's so many parties. There's so many. It's all based, but it's a democracy where you have different people making deals to form a government. So it's a bunch of parties joining together with similar views, and sometimes it works and sometimes it struggles. I must be honest, it's one of the most, for me, living there and watching this, it's one of the hardest things to watch, because to me that's what's slowing Israel down in winning the war and defeating their enemies. It's like, get your act together. The politicians need to get their act together. So that's just something we have to keep in mind. Bibi Netanyahu, I think, is still, and I don't know where they got their data from, but from what I understand, his group, the Likud, which is the biggest party, has still got would still win an election today with the most seats. And the right wing, the center right wing, and the religious parties forming their government would still be the government today. Now, there's the media in Israel, the general media, like in America, and some of the loudest mouthed politicians are very much anti-Bibi Netanyahu. So it might sound like they really that he's not popular. And I'm not saying he's very popular. I'm just saying it's a lot worse. It sounds a lot worse than it really is. So these guys are just like spewing stuff that hasn't been really checked out. They haven't really spoken and gone and checked with Israeli, let's say, people, who are the people you should be checking with, and they're just sort of putting it all on. It's Bibi Netanyahu, and he's acting like a crazy man. It's not an easy political. I mean, he is very tough. If you think Trump's tough, I'd say he's maybe tougher because he has to deal with it every day. And um, I'm not trying to tell you you know, um, I like everything about him, but at the moment, I don't see anyone better than him to make good decisions for that country. So, and it's not an easy. There's a lot of different types of little parties within this government of his. There's the religious, there's the national religious, they mentioned Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's like a far right religious group. Then he's got his party, and there's some secular people that are more right wing. It's not easy, but what I can say is that he's the only guy that can manage it. If any one of these other guys would be given the chance, they could not form a government. Simple as that. So what they're saying is total garbage.
Well, that's good to know that Netanyahu is a little more popular than what is portraying. And I think they quoted a poll that they pulled out of an Israeli newspaper over there, but I'm not necessarily a fan of every single poll out there too, because the vast majority of the polls here in the United States did Trump a huge disservice, saying that he's always at the bottom end of the polls, that he's never going to beat Kamala or anything else like that. And every single one of those polls proved out to be wrong. And so if you've got a left-wing poll, then obviously it's going to be skewed one way or the other. The other question I have for you is, within Netanyahu's party, is there anybody else there that is just as strong as Netanyahu and would put up any type of competition to him specifically that could run against him within the same party? Or do you think that most Jews are set with Netanyahu and like what he's doing?
That is a great question. At the moment, I don't think there's someone in politics that could take over and take over from him because, firstly, I think he's a great statesman, and he's a great orator for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. He's a very smart guy. And honestly, if he wouldn't have gone into politics, he would have been some huge executive at, I mean, he is impressive. Okay. But that's like one of the challenges in Israeli politics. And I think if I'm going to criticize him, I just don't understand it. Like, you got to know that your time's up, and you got to have someone who's going to take over and keep your, what you started going. So there isn't anyone. And I had a close friend who unfortunately passed away a few months ago. He was very close to all those, that political party of Bibi Netanyahu, and he told me the same thing. He said, he needs to find an understudy that will take over. Now, I'll go in for a bit of a tangent. There was a guy by the name of Naftali Bennett who was his chief of staff, who potentially could have been that guy, but then he went off and started his own party, and he turned out to be not so good. And I can talk about that as well. And he became an arch rival enemy. And there were other people in his party, like the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Sa'ar, who they thought would become the next, leader. And then he also sort of had some falling out. And I don't know what it is. I honestly don't know. I'm not saying, no, everyone's got their faults. I'm not. I mean, we can talk about politicians. We can do a whole show on them and their personalities. That's not for now. But I do believe one thing, that if Bibi Netanyahu would, this is my opinion, no one else's, if he would say to the people today, I'm going to resign or retire after I destroy our enemies, which means destroy Hamas and make sure our northern border's safe, and we have some sort of make sure Iran will never attack us, and then I will resign. I believe that everyone will back off him and say, okay, let's figure this out. I hope they would. I would, if I was his arch rival, because I know he's not going to stay around, and I would hold him to that. But the fact that he's still, like, people, there's certain people that just hate him and they want to get him out, and that's sort of what's going on in Israel now. And it's just, I hate watching that. I just can't take it. So I wish he would do that, because I think it would be a good strategy for the people.
I mean, is there like a term limit that they have for that position?
Yeah.
I mean, is that the reason people are trying to push him out? Because he's been in there for a long time.
Yeah, but this is the thing, Uriah. The next elections, I think, are in 2026, unless the government falls, which means some of the smaller parties leave and they haven't got a majority, and then they have to call an election. But at the moment, they're holding together, thank God. So an election would slow things down on the wall. So there was calls for an election after October 7th, and everyone's like, if we have an election, that puts like 3-4 months, and then we go back to war. That's crazy. So you couldn't do that. So thank God, civility, like they didn't do that. But yeah, the elections are in 2026, and he can run again, and I'm sure he will say, I'm running again. And to me, that will just, in my mind, there's just something about him that certain people in the media, and I don't know it. I'm not sure. I'm not like, I got a good friend who I was with in school, and he's on the left. He's a left-wing guy. I love him dearly. He's a good guy. We just don't see eye to eye, and I try not to talk to him about politics and religion. But I saw him a few months ago. He came to Chicago. The first thing that came out of his mouth was how much he hates Bibi and how they've screwed the country and this and that. And I said to him, like, just let's not talk about it. I said, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going there. I just like you too much as a person. So the truth is that I just, maybe they have to find new leaders, and I don't know who it is. I wish I knew, but they have to find new leaders.
Well, I hope someone steps up to the plate, because obviously he can't do it forever.
Yeah, I'm sure that. Trust me, there are lots of. You go there, you'll find 100 of them. You walk the streets, you'll find 100 of them.
I believe God is with the Jewish people, and if they are fighting for their right to worship, He'll make miracles happen. Someone will step up. Someone will be brought forward.
I agree. That's why I'm as hard as it is to watch. That's obviously the core belief that that hopefully there'll be a miracle. There've been. Let's talk about what's going on in Israel now. I mean, with what happened with the war, there were lots of miracles. People came out, even people that were attacked and survived have life-changing. Some not, but some have. So yeah, I agree with you totally.
Well, that's good. Let's move on and continue with this clip here.
Listen to how crazy this is. That we're talking about Ismail Haniyeh, who was the head of Hamas's political bureau, resident in Doha. He was the lead ceasefire negotiator.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the guy that's participating in all these meetings. The crazy thing here is he went to Tehran to attend President Pezeshkian. I always get his name wrong. President Masoud Pezeshkian's inauguration, right?
And that's an opposition president. That's a president.
That's an opposition president, a reformist president who said, hey, you know what? We should have talks with the United States.
This is, Iran took a very weird right turn.
I didn't predict it.
I didn't see it happening.
No. I thought for sure Jalili would win that race, and he got killed. Pezeshkian walloped him. Anyway, the first reports on Haniya's killing were that the Israelis had launched a missile at the guest house that he stayed in. And I even said on the show, that would require violating Jordanian airspace and Iraqi airspace, or Jordanian airspace and Saudi airspace twice, right?
Getting in and getting out, yeah.
That didn't make any sense to me. And then they said, day before yesterday, actually, no. They put a bomb in the house in April because they knew that he stayed in the same house, serious security problem.
Yeah.
Stayed in the same house every time he'd go to Iran, and they just waited for him to go. And then they blew it up remotely. But this goes to the Israeli ability to violate Iranian sovereignty in any way they want. They kill Iranian scientists. They'll do car bombs. They do close-in hits. They have a whole network in Iran that we can only fantasize about. And it's taken years and years to build. I want to say one other thing, too. Back in, what was it, March or April, the Israelis bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus and killed 2 Iranian generals.
Yes.
Major violation of international law, but the Israelis don't care about stuff like that. Anyway, the Iranians responded, again with great restraint. They launched 600 drones, but they told the United States in advance, we're going to send these 600 drones. And then they called in the Jordanian ambassador and said, we're going to fly these 600 drones over your airspace. So it took 6 hours for those drones to cross over. So everybody is like sitting like this, waiting for the drones to come. Right. So the British scattered their jets from bases in Jordan. We scattered our jets. The Israelis scattered their jets and shot down all but 7. Okay? So 7 hit the ground, and there's a little bit of minor damage here and there. And everybody's like, oh, that was the response. No big deal. It was actually a very big deal because it showed the Iranians that the Iron Dome isn't so great as the Israelis say that it is. They were able to get 7 drones through. Now, what if those drones had been carrying BW or CW, right? Or big bombs?
Chemical weapons, biological weapons.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
yes, biological weapons, chemical weapons. It would be unprecedented in history. So the Israelis think they're so smart and so good that they got away with killing 2 generals who just were replaced the next day.
Right. And the world thinks that Israel is so powerful because of their reach.
Look how safe they are. They reached into Syria and killed these guys. They reach into Iran and kill that guy. They bomb Lebanon and kill this guy. It's not as great as they think it is.
Meanwhile, Iran is finding a way to learn more about its enemy without actually killing Iranians.
Exactly.
Because it's a bunch of extremist proxy people who are actually taking the fall.
Right.
Yeah.
So like your original question was, what happens if Hezbollah really does go all into Israel? It's a bloodbath.
See, I think it's more likely that
crazy.
Hezbollah is going to do something than the Iranians. The Iranians,
For sure.
I could see firing a rocket at an Israeli embassy, let's say, or killing an Israeli defense attaché somewhere. Hezbollah, I think, is ready to fight.
And Hezbollah has been training for it for a long time as part of their charter. They're neighbors, right? Hezbollah stands a real chance. And what we learned on October 7th, yes, there were a lot of deaths. Yes, there were a lot of civilian deaths. A solid third of all the people that died were military deaths. IDF, Defense Force, Border Patrol, et cetera, et cetera.
I need to.
Well, let's unpack that. Let's unpack that. So, 3 things. We've got Iran, we got Hezbollah, and we got Hamas. And they're specific saying that it's not about Hamas, it's not about Hezbollah, it's about Iran. And Iran is the people pushing essentially the extermination of the Jewish state. I mean, that's really what boils down to, is they want the extermination of the Jewish state.
Right.
And they're
then
doing
the
it.
extermination of America.
Yeah, they're trying to do it through Hamas, through Hezbollah, just in the same way that the United States has done proxy wars. I mean, we're definitely not innocent of proxy wars in the least bit. But I agree that Israel does need to completely annihilate Hamas, because if they don't, it's just going to keep coming back. They've got to annihilate that terrorist organization completely. But once that terrorist organization is annihilated, the Iranians and others are just going to push through Hezbollah and others. So the conflict itself is not going to stop. It's not going to stop. I mean, it's not going to come from Gaza anymore, but it's not going to stop. So what's your opinion on Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas?
Okay, so I'll say full disclosure, never served in the Israeli army. I served in the South African army, but I did meet a lot of soldiers, speak to them, whatever. So my opinion is like this. Firstly, that what they were saying was total, they must be there's just so one-sided view of things. Israel's surrounded by rabid enemies. They're outnumbered by who knows how much. They're a small country. They're and they got all these enemies around them. You darn sure they have to do proactive attacks on people like Iran and all that. Okay, because if they don't, then they're sitting ducks. So that's sort of what their defense has been set up to. They have to do some proactive acts of attack and take out individuals that are, in charge of, let's say, some of their, who knows what, different military wings of the Iranian force that's going to, have nuclear bombs, like scientists and all of that. They got to do that. Otherwise, they'll have a nuclear bomb and they'll use it. And they've said it, and you got to believe them. They will use it. So those, I don't want to call them clowns, but what are they saying? I just don't get their logic. That's number one. Okay, so Hezbollah was funded. They were using Syria as a pathway to come through and deliver weapons, and Israel was trying to stop them. And they had a huge arsenal pointed at Israel, and they had ballistic missiles. They could reach Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and they densely populated areas, so they could take out civilians. What they said about Hamas, okay, that a third were military, that is it's like almost giving them a pass for attacking. They went and they killed women and children. Okay, it happened to be that there were military there to defend. Unfortunately, Israel was their intelligence and their military were lacking, and they should be, people in charge should be embarrassed. And if the military was in place, they wouldn't have got near them. There wasn't one airplane, there wasn't one fighter jet that went out, and they could have knocked half these guys out before they even got to the kibbutzim and all the people that were living there in Kfar Aza and all these different Be'eri and all that. So what are they talking about? They were there to defend. They were outnumbered and they were outgunned. Police took their little pistols and went to fight, Hamas people with guns. People went from all over the country. They took their what they had, and they went to fight because there was a failure in the military. If the military would have acted, we would have taken them out. They wouldn't have gotten near where they were going. So,
well, I'm looking at us here in the United States, not to break in on it. I'm looking at here, and I'm looking at our own border, and how many people the Biden administration let through our border. And lucky for us, nothing dramatic has happened. And I am dead
Well,
positive. There's massive terrorist organizations now within the United States that have come
oh
across
yeah,
the border, and they're just kind of picnicking there and just waiting for their moment to attack us at like you said, our
right.
weakest point. But going back to the Israeli border, and there was definitely a deficiency on the border where all of a sudden the border agents
Yeah,
between Israel and Gaza were all slaughtered. And it showed them all being killed, and they just stormed across. So, and it just goes to show that why Israel has such a huge spy network and security network, and I mean, similar to our CIA. I mean, they have their network over there, but
right.
different from us, they've got to bat 1,000. Because if they don't bat 1,000, if they don't have everything learned, and then something like October 6th is going to happen, and
Right.
that's scary. If I was a citizen there and I'm in a neighborhood, just a normal neighborhood, I've got my kids, I go to school or they go to school every day, we go to work every day, and I'm a mile, 2 miles from a border that could completely annihilate us. And I know the Israeli government's doing everything possible, but again, they got about 1,000. And one instance where they're out there killing, like you said, these generals in Syria or these generals from Iran, and eliminating the nuclear threat, because they'd use that nuclear bomb in a heartbeat and just screw Israel. We'll just bomb them out of existence. Then the rest of the world kind of, again, unfairly harps on top of Israel for having these intelligence agencies, not realizing that if Israel doesn't bat 1,000, if they don't know everything that's going on in those neighboring countries, October 6th is just going to happen over and over and over again. And they're going to get more bold the next time because they knew that there was an intelligence deficiency there.
Right.
It's going to foment it. It's going to make it worse. And
right.
it peeves me that people are mad at Israel for having the intelligence network that they have, and the occasional assassinations of these generals and stuff like that they do, but they're playing on the preventative side. I mean, if we as the United States could go back to 9/11 and go back to the pilot program down in Florida where these people got trained and knocked those guys out, we would have done that if we had the intelligence to do that. We would have done that in a heartbeat and saved the towers, saved 3,000 people that day. And that's where our intelligence was inefficient. But to go against Israel and say, you can't have this intelligence network, you can't go and kill these people, or you can get in trouble for doing that, I don't understand that mindset, because again, October 7th or October 6th would just happen over and over and over again, and get worse and worse every single time.
I'll tell you, the other thing is, they said, why did they kill Ismail Haniyeh, the leaders? Why did they kill the Hezbollah leader and all that? Like, what are they, stupid? You These are just terrorists in suits. I mean, these are the guys that are getting thousands of people to go and give themselves up to die, like put bombs on them and go fight little kids and all that. They part of the issue. So you know what? Everyone should be patting them on the back. They're bad people. They've got blood on their hands. And what are these guys thinking? Oh, you have to go and shake his hand and treat him like a nice guy, because although he's in charge of a terrorist organization that believes in killing women and children. I mean, like, these guys just don't get it. And I'm sad to say they were former CIA, because, if you join the CIA, in my mind, you have to understand what your job is. I mean, you're there to fight for the Western world, which, fortunately, unfortunately, guess what? Israel's part of the Western world. They're a Western country. Let's take away the Judaism and all that. They're part of your team. So, and for sure, Mossad and CIA share intelligence. Hopefully they do. So what are they thinking? Like, thank God they're not in the CIA anymore, but their whole thought process is just doesn't make sense to me, because here you got a bad guy, and to me, Israel, the whole thing, what they did with Hezbollah, they took out their leaders, They took out, they had the whole cell phone um, thing where they like maimed a bunch of them. They should be celebrated as like great moments of taking out bad guys. Now, are Jews bloodthirsty people? Like, I lived there for 5 years. These guys don't want to fight. They would rather just live a normal life. Okay, they would love to live in peace. It's just ridiculous that they like make it. I mean, those three guys were just making out Israel to be this bloodthirsty country. Let me tell you, 9/11. Unfortunately, I mean, I think that some Americans were scared by it or shocked or whatever. They couldn't believe people hated them that much. But people do, unfortunately. I hate that as well. I'd rather it was different. So wake up, guys. Wake up.
Well,
It's
I
sad, but
don't
it's
really think
true.
a lot of people understand the culture over there because
Right.
that extremist Muslim side, and we're not talking conservative Muslims because I have conservative Muslim friends of mine that they talk bad about what's happened over there as well. I know conservative Muslims and conservative Palestinians that live and have lived amongst the Jews for generations, and they work around the Jewish people. Their families go to the baseball parks of the Jewish people, and they just want to live in peace as well. But then you've got that extremist element, and for being in the CIA and being stationed over, they should understand that the culture over there isn't peace. It's not what they want. They want extermination. They want them out at all
Right.
costs. And Iran, as a state, and everybody recognizes them as a state, and I think that's where the rest of the world has that confusion is that they try to treat them as a neighboring country. I mean, the Europeans in the UN have that big thing with, well, what's the difference between Iran and Spain or Iran and Czechoslovakia and Iran and Ukraine? I
Right.
mean, it's just another country. And it
Right.
isn't just another country. They are run by seditious people that want the Israeli people dead. And then once the Israeli people are dead, they want to spread their type of extreme religion throughout the world. And you're already
Right.
starting to see that throughout the country. You see that in England. England's got a
Yeah.
huge
England and
immigration problem
France.
where they've got entire neighborhoods that have become completely Muslim, and it's not not Muslims are bad, but the most of them are extremists. I mean, it's not the conservative ones that are moving up there and blocking streets and trying to set up the that Shia type of extremist law or that Sharia, not Shia, Sharia law amongst other countries. We even had that here in the United States. I think it was down in Texas or New Mexico where there was a community down there where they tried to kick out anybody out of the city if they weren't Muslim, and they tried to set up as legal within the state that this city is going to be run by Sharia law, and they tried to pull that off in the United States, and it was shut down
Right. There's a
by the
place in New
government.
Jersey as well
Yeah,
that
but
the cops are wearing Palestinian flags. One other thing about that, Uriah, is that when it comes to, like, as I said, CIA people, I mean Iran. Let's talk about Iran. Iran in the 70s had good relations with Israel, by the way, under the Shah. And I don't think the Shah was like this amazingly nice guy. He also ruled the country by force, but they were a westernized country, and and a lot of Jews lived there, and they had a very good relationship. They did had big businesses and all that type of thing. So once again, we're not saying the Iranian people, we're saying the people that are at the moment running Iran. Um, and I'm not sure. Look, I don't know. I don't know how many Iranians are for this type of thing and hate Jews, and how many don't, because I guess there was an Iranian, I think he was a wrestler who fought an Israeli and shook hands, and when he went back to Iran, they executed him. I think there was that case, and there was one that wouldn't fight an Israeli. So I think in the Olympics or one of these international events. So I don't know. I wish, and I'm sure we'll never know unless there's uprising and they can defeat overthrow the government and have a more normal government. We'll never know if these people really want this type of rule and want to live like this or not.
Well, it's hard to find that out because you're trusting in.
I'm saying we'll never know.
Well, I don't know if you can trust in how these people come to power. I mean, they're not exactly having free and fair elections over there, so you don't know how these extremists are getting to power. Now, if the elections were free and fair, and we could trust that they were free and fair, and then the people were still voting these type of extremists into office, then we know that the majority of the people are feeling the same way, and they're probably against Israel. Right. But because they don't have free and fair elections, and we don't exactly know how these people are getting in power, we don't know how many of the people are for it or against it. I made this point in last week's podcast that it was proven fact that a lot of the people that came over from Gaza and created that slaughter were not Hamas. They were just normal Palestinian citizens, just normal people coming across and killing and kidnapping and just down with Israel. And so you know that sentiment is pretty profound amongst most Palestinians. And
Palestinians, yeah.
Everybody here is saying, well, Israel's being indiscriminate, and they're just bombing hospitals, and they're bombing schools and churches and all this kind of stuff, and they're just killing innocent bystanders all the time. And we know that Hamas is using all the women and the children, all these people as human shields, and they're doing it on purpose. Why? Because they know they can manipulate the news cycle and getting everybody to go against Israel because of these supposed innocents that are dying. And if the innocents would stand up and say, no, you're not hiding your missiles or your arms in our churches or our schools because Israel's going to bomb us, then if there was enough sentiment there of the innocents saying, hey, we don't want this, then Hamas probably couldn't have their people there because the people would just start yelling and screaming at them. But that I don't see that happening.
Right.
And kind of moving on from this point, there's been an argument since the 60s and 70s about the two-state solution. And I don't necessarily believe in the two-state solution. I mean, that would be great if the Palestinians would accept this two-state position and just live in peace. But as you've pointed out multiple times, peace means weakness in their culture, in their mindset. Peace means weakness. Peace is now the time to attack. The peace is now the time to expand because they don't see that as peace. They see it as weakness. And so I don't see the two-party system ever working. But the best time that it was about to work was back during the Clinton years. And he had Yasser Arafat went to Camp David, and they were trying to, or at least his entourage went to Camp David and tried to settle this thing. And as much as they tried to come up with agreements, Israel was actually giving up an extensive amount of land that they shouldn't have been agreeing to, because I don't think that was right on their part, but they were willing to give it all up just to have peace. But I think the second they started agreeing to giving up all this land showed exactly that. And then Yasser Arafat went back and says, well, they're willing to give us this, this, and this. And they says, well, if they're willing to give up all that, what else can we just take? Why don't we just go out and take it? And I saw this video where one of the Clinton administrators was talking in back doors behind the scenes with one of the delegation from Yasser Arafat. And they specifically mentioned that Yasser Arafat says that we can't accept anything. We're here to kind of show a good face that we're in the negotiating process, but he openly said, I cannot take this back to my people because they won't take it. They won't take it. It is the Jews are gone or nothing, and that's why it kind of all fell apart back then. And I want to, before I get your comments, I want to play this clip from President Clinton. So everybody believes it's not just me saying that. I mean, this is straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
And then I want to have your comments on it.
Absolutely.
depends on whether you care what happens to the Palestinians as opposed to the Hamas government and the people with guided missiles. Yes, they were. Yes, they were. No, wait a minute. Yes, they were. And Hamas is really smart. When they decide to rocket Israel, they insinuate themselves in the hospitals, in the schools, in the highly populous areas, and they are smart. So they try. So they wait. So they try to put the Israelis in a position of either not defending themselves or killing innocents. They're good at it. They're smart. They've been doing this a long time. Look, I don't agree. I killed myself to give the Palestinians a state. I had a deal they turned down that would have given them all of Gaza, all of Gaza, between 96 and 97% of the West Bank, compensating land in Israel, you name it.
So
that was hard to watch.
Yeah,
well,
so
okay,
I mean, to point out before you get comment, just the key points there. So they recognized back then that Hamas specifically put everything in churches, schools, and hospitals, clear back to the Clinton administration, and yet they're yelling at everybody now, oh, you can't bomb those places. They're not really there. Clinton knew that. The Bushes knew that even before then. They've been doing this for 30, 40 plus years. It's nothing new, but yet the news media out there is like, this is a whole new thing. This is a new tactic, and it's not really happening. They're just saying that it's happening. And then Clinton specifically says, and I've read the articles on it, and we could even pull the articles up here, that he had the two-state solution, and they turned it down 4 different times that he proposed it. And Israel was giving up most of the West Bank, all of Gaza, even additional lands within Israel just to have that peace. And it was Yasser Arafat at the time, turned it down every single time.
Every single time, yep. That's right. He had 97% of what he wanted, what he so-called wanted. Okay, but he didn't really want it because he wanted the whole, okay, I'll tell you a quick story. This is a true story. It happened a few weeks ago. A friend of mine was flying from Chicago to Florida, gets to it's Midway Airport, which is the other airport, and he parks his car, and the guy picking him up to take him to the to his gate happens to be a Palestinian. So he's wearing his head covering, and the Palestinian guy says, "You Jewish?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "You know what? You guys, we're going to push you out of Israel. We're going to take it all, and we are going to, you guys are we're going to push you into the sea." So my friend says to him,
"That's in Chicago."
That's Chicago. So my friend said, I said to him, I would have said, "Hey, have a nice day. I'm going to take someone else." But he couldn't. He was already in the van or whatever, and the guy was going to keep his keys. So he couldn't sort of say something to him. So he said to the guy, "How about let's make peace? Like, don't you want peace?" He says, "No peace. You need to either go into the sea or you should go back to Eastern Europe where you came from." So he was like, this friend of mine was like broken. I mean, he was like, it was horrible for him. And I was like so mad. And I thought to myself, that's what they really wanted. That's the answer. I mean, Hamas said they're going to do it again. I mean, they said it to the media. The guy said, "We're going to do it again. We're going to come back and try." And the aim of that attack was to get as far as they could to Tel Aviv. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, they bumped into the Nova Festival and they kept on massacring there. But Arafat was just the version. I mean, he was like, this whole thing is just like, they all got one aim. Arafat's got the same aim as Hamas, and it's all like intertwined, the hatred of the Jews. And there's one more question I want to ask you to prove this point. How many people now in Gaza went and tried to get the Israelis who were going in with their army and show them where the hostages were? Because if they would have got the hostages out, I guarantee you they would have said, fine, we'll cease fire. We'll take a break. We'll see if we can figure something out with these people. We'll stop. Just give us, Netanyahu said, just give me my hostages, lay down your weapons, and we'll stop. Okay. How many people have said, let's do that? Let's rather
not
do
a
that.
single person has come forth. I mean, even if they had one, even occultly, secretly coming forward, Israel would have gone in and gotten the hostages. I mean, the hostages would have been free a long time ago. So not a single Palestinian is coming forward, even, like I said, secretly and occultly and through an email or a text message. There's been no communication at all from any of them.
There's not. They offered them money, Uriah. They offered them thousands of dollars. They openly said, if you help us, we'll give you money and we'll get you out of there. We'll give you safety and money. It's like watching one of those mafia movies, If you inform on the mafia, you'll go on a witness protection program. They're offering them, it's like they're doing that and they still won't do it. They still won't do it because their hatred, they'll rather live in a tent. Just remember this. They'll rather live in a tent in a miserable, horrible life than say, let's live in peace and let the Jewish people live next door to you. Think of that. Think if Mexico did that. What would America do?
And it's completely destroyed down. I've seen the drone footage of Gaza right now, and it's just like there's nothing left. It's just rubble. And literally people are trying to build shacks amongst the concrete and the rebar and tents, and yet they still won't come forward and say, look, this has got to end. We're tired of living like this. And the funny thing is the neighboring countries are not necessarily supporting the Palestinians either, because Egypt won't take them, Saudi Arabia won't take them, the Jordanians, who are supposedly their fellow comrades, are not taking them. No one wants them. Because of the liability that comes with that. And like you said, not a single Palestinian has come forward, even with money, with security, with moving them out of the country. And if I was there and my family, my kids were sitting on concrete and dust and you don't even know where your next meal is going to come.
Right.
And you had the promise of money, a new house, new dwelling, I could get you out of here. I would have done that in a heartbeat. But yet none of them, not a single one has come forward?
No one. And their families that are having these, some hostages were rescued from families. It's a mixture. This one, I saw this on one of the show that I watch from Israel every day. They had a guy who actually is a fascinating human being, a fascinating guy. He left Gaza and he converted to Judaism. And they said to him, like, what's going on? Like, what's with these uprisings, so-called demonstrations they're having in Gaza? He said, it's all a show. Don't worry about it. It's a show. He said, if you look at some of the hostages when they were coming out, you saw all these guys with their covered faces and different headbands. And each headband is for a different faction. There was Fatah, there was Ashraf, there was Hamas, there was Islamic Jihad. I don't know. There were 5 different ones.
What's your understanding of the difference between the Fatah government and Hamas?
The difference is that Yasser Arafat had a strong, he was really one of the founders of the so-called resistance terrorist group called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And then there was sort of like break-offs. Think of it like this, Uriah. If you were like, you set up a company and then let's say you do some bad things. So they knock that company out. So you need other branches because you just got to feed, they will never get you because it's like that effect. So there were different break-offs. And then Hamas was started and, sort of a break-off from the PLO. So Arafat really, his group was the initial founding group, and they were in Tunis and then Lebanon, and then when Israel attacked Lebanon because there were terrorist attacks from there. Then Arafat fled. He fled, and I think he went to Tunis. And but there were breakaways. And then when they decided to make peace with him, so then there was a breakaway. And if you're gonna see the video of the son of Hamas. Son of Hamas said that Arafat used to come visit his father and tell him, I'm going to make peace. And, this whole thing was crooked. But Hamas are supposedly more religious, more, Fatah are more modernized. As the son of Hamas says, the Fatah guys like this guy that's in charge of them now. They just suits in terrorists in suits. That's all they are. They talk a bit better. They're more presentable, but they're the same deal. And they've got the same hatred for the Jews. It's not like they feel like there could be peace. They sort of, did Arafat ever say, I recognize the state of Israel? He didn't. He never said that. None of them will say that. Okay, they sort of twist their words, and you can put a gun to their head and say, "Do you recognize the state of Israel?" And they'll say, "No, I don't."
Yeah,
it's just. I wish it could be different. I'm not saying that. I want that. I want them to say,
well, we know that they're never going to recognize the state of Israel. That's not their goal. And as much as people push this whole two-state solution, I keep hearing that even amongst my own friends. I hear, why don't they just do a two-state solution? I'm like, it will never ever work. They see it as a weakness. It won't stop. They'll get their state if it ever accepted. They'll get their state. And they'll want more. It's like giving someone your hand, they'll take your arm, then your whole body. It will not stop there.
No such thing. There's no such thing. You're right. Look, I grew up in South Africa. I'll share this with you. I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in apartheid. I wasn't a big fan of it. I didn't like it. It was very, very hard to watch. Okay. And when I was there for the transition, I was there when Mandela got elected. Okay, and I'll say this: I was in the army in South Africa because there was a draft. There were only white people in the army, and most of them were racist at the time. Okay, I asked my corporal, "Would you ever salute a black officer?" And he said, "Never, because they're not in my Bible." Okay, I was like, "Whoa, that's terrible," but I also remember going to watch soccer matches with 60,000 black people, and me and my friends were white, and never felt an iota of threat. Okay, I didn't feel the hatred, and I should have felt the hatred. If I was a black man, I would have hated the white man, but I never felt that. My father had a store. We sold mainly to black people. We never felt hated. Unfortunately, that's another story, and we don't have to discuss it now about South Africa, but it was totally different. When I was living in Israel, I was studying with Israeli Arabs, and I just felt that they hated Jews, and they were equal right Arabs. They went to school. Some of them didn't even serve in the army. They were given the exact rights that an Israeli was given, and in fact, the Israelis bent over backwards to try and make them feel comfortable, and they still openly said that they hate the government and they don't believe in the state of Israel. These are Israeli Arabs, Muslim Israeli Arabs. So there's just
I see that type of racism as well. I mean, there's people who just won't accept it, and I don't think that there's that type of racism here in this country anymore.
No.
I mean, there's a few, and people try to pull out that racism and say that there's racism because they need a problem, and without a problem, they don't need to be in power. They don't. There's nothing for them to fix. If there's nothing for them to fix, then no one's going to vote for them. They're not going to be in power. So they always try to create the problem and foment that vitriol between the races. And us down here as citizens, I don't think we care about that.
Yet they've been pretty successful at it, too.
They've been very successful at it. But it's different over there in Jerusalem and in Israel because the Palestinians and the Muslims, they do have that type of racism. They physically hate the Jewish people, and it's when they say river to the sea, they mean it. And
Yeah.
it's not about peace. It's not about having their own state. It's about annihilating a people. Now, I want to go to this next clip real quick because I want to get to the protests in New York and then what Ilhan Omar. And I have no idea how she got into Congress, but let's get to these two. And
Hamas' first crime against children in the Palestinian societies is not arming them or encouraging them to carry suicide bombing attacks. It's the religious, ideological indoctrination that I had to go through with one intention in mind: to annihilate the state of Israel. This is Hamas' primary goal. In this truth, there is no confusion. I speak as first-hand witness on Hamas and their intention. My father is one of the founders of Hamas movement. I was there when Hamas was born. I was before Hamas was born. And as I said before, I will be there after Hamas is dead. I am not a part of propaganda. I don't work for nobody. I only represent myself. And on this authority, I speak. So don't be mistaken. And take my words very carefully. Hamas is committing a crime against this generation and the next generations to come. So blaming Israel is not going to solve the problem. Imagine a 10-year-old child. When I disobeyed Hamas, I was tied up to a post, and I was whipped by Hamas top leader, and I don't want to mention his name because he's not worthy.
we're going to go through these clips pretty quick. And sorry, I thought the next clip was Ilhan Omar in the protests in Europe, but we'll get to that after the son of Hamas here. And so this gentleman's father co-founded Hamas. I mean, like he said there, he was there before Hamas. He was there after Hamas. He was beaten by Hamas.
Right.
I mean, he was there. And so if there's anybody out there that has the ultimate say, that has the authority to tell you exactly what Hamas's goal is, this is the guy, because he's the son of the Hamas leader. He knows exactly what their goals are. He grew up in that environment, knows what they're teaching. And he specifically says two things. Is one, they're indoctrinating their kids to hate Israel, to hate Jews. So they're born with it. They're born in their schools, are born with that instruction their entire life, that the Jewish population is the enemy. And like I said, they're completely skewing the current generation, all future generations. And the first thing he said there is the goal of Hamas is the annihilation of Israel. He specifically said that goal of Hamas is the annihilation of Israel. It's not a state of their own. It's not peace. It never will be that. Right?
Right. So, firstly, I want to say that he must be a very brave human being to be doing this. But on the other hand, like, my question is, when you get a guy like this and you hear him say it so clearly, are people not paying attention? Like, do they just, my belief is that they sort of just push it aside. They say, no, this, I'm not, I just didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. right? I mean, like, what could it be? Can it be any clearer than that, Uriah? It's simpler and clearer. He's not a orator. He speaks very simply. He says Hebrew isn't his, I mean, sorry, English isn't his first language, but he says it clearly. Um, I mean, he was right in it.
Well, he
He
says,
was the son of
be
Hamas.
careful with my words. He specifically says that. He says, believe
Right.
me when I'm saying this.
Right.
And like you say,
Now-
I think people choose to ignore that. Why? Because they want to hate. They want to be against Israel. And
Right.
that's where that
That's what it
anti-Semitism
is.
is
It can
coming
only be
in.
that.
It's people are purposely and knowingly ignoring stuff like this.
How do we get this
Right.
information to the average citizen, though? They're not watching.
They're not watching.
They're not watching that.
Well, you go to the news organizations, you go to our political leaders like Ilhan Omar that we'll go into, and they're not putting this
Right.
thing out there. Why? Because they have a specific agenda. They're anti-Semitic themselves. They're
Right.
against these, again, morals and values that we're trying to show on this show. And the whole reason why we're having this podcast is bringing people back to God. Most of these people pushing these narratives don't have a belief in God. They're not Christian, or they claim to be Christian, not practicing. They don't have a Jewish faith into them. They don't have those morals and values in them, and they try to push these lies upon everybody else.
The lies, they're going into our universities. That's where they're indoctrinating our youth. The
And it's
youth that are
working.
going for higher education to be leaders, business people, and serve in this country. And they're getting them in the universities, and they're coming out lawyers, doctors, newscast leaders with a background of lies.
Complete and utter background of lies. And like Ben Carson said last week, the left likes the ignorance because the ignorance is easy to manipulate. And that's what it comes down to, is the ignorance is easy
And
to
you know,
manipulate.
we talked about how spoiled we are in this country, ignorant of the lives that people are living in these other countries. And we've got it so good. I mean, what are the things we complain about? Eggs are expensive. My life's really hard. My great ancestor went through a really difficult time. I'd like some reparation. I mean, so that's why those are the things that they're teaching us should be important to us. And it's ridiculous when you look at it in comparison.
And these professors at universities are really having a problem with that. So, I mean, let's go on to these next clips. I want to blow through these clips because he says a lot of really powerful things. So I'm really hoping everybody's paying attention to his exact words, because he literally lays it out exactly as it is. And if you can listen to these things and still think that Israel is the problem, like he just said, Israel is not the problem. If you still think after this video that Israel's a problem, then you want to believe that Israel is a problem. It's not coming off of fact. It's not coming off of truth.
Right.
Majority of the Palestinians blamed Israel. And as a child, I took it as a Quran. I took it as a holy scripture that Israel was our problem. But then as I grew up, I start identifying the enemy within. The religious authorities, the corrupt leaderships, who basically did not care about children. They did not care about Palestinians. They still don't care about nobody but themselves. And the world has been empowering them against the prey, against the victims. This has to come to an end. It is a personal problem. And I swear I will not die before I see Hamas dead. Can I make this a goal to my life? Unlike many of the leaders who sit here and give Hamas legitimacy by not condemning them, if the entire world stand there and say otherwise, the child witness within will always be there. And nobody can deceive that child anymore.
Well, like I said, we're going to go through these clips pretty quickly, but the way they're indoctrinating the kids is the same way that our universities are indoctrinating our youth. It's making them believe in something that is not true, that Israel's a problem. But what's fomenting that is world leaders are giving Hamas legitimacy, like treating them like they're an actual nation, like an actual people. And they're not. They're a terrorist organization. They don't care about their own people. They don't care about their own kids. They don't care about any of that. All they want is what their selfish desires need, and that's the destruction of Israel. They see one goal in mind, and that's it. That's all they see is just that one goal in mind. So
actually, I'm going to add something to this. I did a bit of research and watched this one person. The other thing that's added to this is a country called Qatar, and Qatar. Or what, I don't know, there's a term, I forgot the term, but they practice this Islamic, they consider a country, they host the Olympics, I think, no, they host the World Cup soccer, they seem somewhat westernized, except they sponsor Al Jazeera, which is one of the biggest, I'd say media biases for Hamas and for the Arabs out there. And then they also have a huge influence in the colleges in America. And I'm not sure, you should do some research on this, Uriah, because that's one of the reasons
I've seen Al Jazeera, and I know how biased they are.
And they gave Hamas a lot of money.
Yeah, most of the news organizations out over here quote from Al Jazeera. Right. It's like it's an actual legitimate news organization.
So you can do a whole show on Qatar, because not only that, they also housed Hamas leaders during, in hotels, and they were living in wealth and living like kings in Qatar. So I'm going to just add one more thing. I had a question when the war started. And we all saw Biden, hobbling down the plane going to Israel, and Blinken and all these clowns. And I honestly have got no respect for them. They could have actually pulled a move that might have helped stop the war or stop Israel just going on and on and on. And they could have called Qatar and said, I want the leaders of Hamas arrested, and I want them in Guantanamo Bay. Otherwise, I'm going to bomb every soccer field and every oil field that you got, and we're going to turn you into like a poor country in 24 hours. And I'm sure Qatar would have done that. And then they could have said, now we can negotiate getting the hostages out. But the Qataris they're very smart. I mean, you got to give them credit. They are playing like they're in the middle. They're trying to help get the hostages out. They're involved in the negotiations. Yet, look what they're doing. They sponsor Hamas. They give money. They sponsor Al Jazeera. They spew, all the lies on Israel. But they also in the negotiation. So they are one of the big players in this whole thing. And I'm not sure exactly. I don't want to say how I think they fit in, because I've got to look in. I mean, I just in my own thing have to learn a bit more. But I always said, why the heck didn't they go after the Qataris? Why didn't they put pressure on them? But they were never, ever sort of threatened or anything. They came out looking like they're the good guys in this whole thing, and they're not. So that's just one thing to add.
Well, let's go to this next clip then.
My problem was not Israel who arrested me during that experience. It was Hamas again, but this time with a lot more brutality, a lot more pain than the pain I experienced on a personal level. In prison, Hamas tortured and killed hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, Hamas members, because Hamas had suspicion that they were collaborating with the state of Israel. I spent 16 months in that first arrest among Hamas leaders. What was called Al-Majd, Hamas security wing, for those who don't know, this division of Hamas. This security wing, they brutally tortured people, putting needles under their fingernails, burning plastic on their bodies, putting off cigarettes in their skin. Screams of hundreds of prisoners over that period of time. How could I forget? And I don't wish for any of you to go through such experience to realize what type of monster we are dealing with. It's unfortunate that my father helped establish such an organization. And I don't mean to dishonor him. I love my father and I will always do. I'm not here to dishonor my people. I love my people.
So, I mean, Hamas is not that honorable. I mean, you've got the son of one of the co-founders of Hamas, and because they think that he is helping Israel and a lot of other thousands of other Palestinians, like they're saying, because they suspect it, they put him in prison and torture him. Their own people, the son of their own leader. I mean, how would you? Me as a father, I couldn't do that. I couldn't put my own son in prison and torture him. I don't care what he did wrong. So it just goes to show that there is no peace. That's not their goal. If they're willing to torture their own people, they're willing to torture their own kids, their end goal is absolute annihilation of Israel. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
And he says right there he was indoctrinated and told about this his entire life. That's what he knew growing up, that his entire life, that this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to hate Israel. But I have no idea how this happened. Somehow he saw the light and grew out of that and saw what it is for what it is. And how did he realize that was all wrong?
Maybe we'll get him on a future interview.
Well, I'll tell you how. What happened was he was in prison, and a lot of times Israelis, will try find a way to get one of these guys to work for them. Because he saw a cruelty when he was arrested. Because he was originally a terrorist. He was a Hamas terrorist, so they arrested him. But they, I guess they tried to turn him and they tried to turn them into being assets for them, and that's what happened. That's what happened with him. They try to show him, like, hey, we're trying to live a better life. Look what your guys are doing. At the time, there were these suicide bombers going into Israel, strapped up with bombs and blowing themselves up in the middle of Jerusalem and Netanyahu and Tel Aviv, and it was horrible. I mean, it was like happening every second week. So that's why what he did was, I think he was telling them when they were going to send another one of these suicide bombers. Look, I mean, Israel's, it was unbelievable how they stopped it, because you can't really defend against that, Uriah. How do you defend against it? Got a regular
Clinton
guy
was talking about that too.
And then he blows himself up.
Yeah, Clinton was talking about that too, because he was saying that during the negotiations,
right,
they were purposely sending off suicide bombers to disrupt the negotiations because they didn't want to have those happen.
Throughout
the negotiations, there was constant suicide bombers throughout Israel coming from Gaza.
Okay, but you know what happened? Clinton was more emboldened. He said, "Let's keep going. Let's get it done." Because let's just try keep going. It's hard, but let's keep going. It wasn't logical. If I would do the opposite, I would say, okay, now go out and destroy these people. They're blowing themselves up you're trying to help them, and they forget it. But Clinton didn't budge. Clinton kept going, and that's sort of what I criticize him on. I mean, I guess he was trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize, and he thought he was like trying to do something. Let's say that he'll be remembered in history for, but that's not what you do things for. You got to look at things as they are and say, like, can I get them to sit down and make peace when the one guy's like saying he's shaking his hand, but then he's telling his guys to go and blow themselves up. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, would you make peace with Mexico if Mexico says we want to live in peace? Oh, and by the way, we're going to just keep blowing ourselves up in your country. You'd say, no, I'm not doing that. Like, fix your country, get yourselves, like, make sure you're truthful about what you want to do, and then we'll make peace. So it was a joke. It was ridiculous. And,
yeah, but it's never been about peace. It's never been about peace. And that's why they're blowing themselves up. And anybody to think that wasn't coming from the top, it wasn't coming from Yasser Arafat himself, you're lying to yourself, because it wouldn't have happened if he didn't know about it. And even if it happened once, if he was serious about the negotiations, he would have said, no, let's put a stop to that. We don't want that right now. And he would have put a stop to it. It would have been instantaneously. Right. But it didn't. It happened over and over and over again, which he was commanding it and condoning it.
I'll take another step on this. If he would have said, guys, I can't control these crazies that are doing this. I need your help. Then I'm telling you, the Israelis and the Americans would have said, fine, let's get in there and let's sort them out. If you behind us, we'll do this. We'll find the guys, we'll find the people in charge of this, and we'll put a stop to it, and because we'll have your backing. But he didn't even say that. He didn't even say, you know what, I can't control it. It's, he didn't ever say, I can't control it because there's a strong group that don't want peace, and I need to crush them. Then they would have said, okay.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think this is either the last or second to last.
We had a common goal. That goal was to stop suicide bombing attacks. Hamas, for those who don't know, or those who have short memory, carried many suicide bombing attacks during the 90s and the early 2000s. Dozens of suicide bombing attacks where a suicide bomber took an explosive built went to inside a bus and blew himself up, killing all type of people. Not only Israelis. Americans were killed. Europeans were killed. Other nationalities, including Israeli Arabs, including Muslims. Hamas did not differentiate. Take Hotel Park, for example. On a holiday, on the most sacred Jewish holiday, a suicide bomber go into the dinner, blow himself up, kill more than 30 people. Some Holocaust survivors died in that attack. Dolphinarium, some teenagers having fun at the beach. Hamas suicide bomber killed about 18 and wounded dozens. Look up, see how many buses. It did not stop there. Hamas attacked the Hebrew University. 6 Americans were killed in that attack. They targeted synagogues. They targeted everywhere. Knowing the Israeli retaliation, they invite violence. They love violence. Hamas, without chaos, cannot survive. It's their climate. This is where they thrive. When the peace process came, if you follow the history of Hamas and their development or their evolution, whatever you want to call it, Hamas, what sabotaged the peace process through suicide bombing attacks. And they don't have a vision. That's the problem. Because nobody can satisfy their ambition when they are waging a holy war. We're not talking about IRA. We're not talking about other political terrorist organizations that we can pressure them, bend them, bring them to the negotiating table. We are talking about a religious group that does not believe in political borders, that wants to annihilate an entire race in order to build an Islamic state. I don't know what else can be said about this group. And I don't know why it's not obvious to everybody that the United Nations fail to condemn them. Bunch of rapists. This is what they are. Lower than animal consciousness.
Lower than animal consciousness. I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But his most important statement that he makes there is, I don't know why this isn't obvious. This is obvious. But I think, again, the UN and other nations, they purposely are ignoring statements like this. Because, I mean, again, this is firsthand. He's the son of the Hamas co-founder. He was born in this, was a terrorist himself that got arrested growing up. And then he finally saw the light and figured out that what they were doing was wrong.
Right.
And the rest of the world just is purposely ignoring that. I mean, he makes his statements at the UN. And
right.
He specifically says the Hamas's goal is the annihilation of another race. Again, it's not peace.
Right.
It's not their own state. They want the entire area, and then they want to set up an Islamic state. Not before then.
Right.
Not before then. It's annihilate first, then set up the Islamic State. And the United States just seems to be the only one that's really backing that up. And it really depends on who's in office as to how much we back it up. Because
right.
The last presidency was kind of mediocre. I mean, Biden was not like all out backing up Israel. I think he was backing up Israel out of political correctness because he knows that that's what the American people want, is we have to back up Israel. And again, it comes back to our Christianity, is we believe that the Jewish people as the holy people. But the Biden administration, they couldn't care less about the Jewish people or anything else like that. They saw Israel as a political football that they needed to keep in the air because that's what the people wanted, and so they kind of put half measures out there to support it. Nothing really substantive that would actually have helped solve the problem. It took Trump to really start solving problems. I mean, he started doing that back in his first administration when he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and actually recognized Jerusalem as the true capital and started really supporting Israel. Right. And then now he's putting his own threats out there and saying, Hamas, you need to release those hostages. And he's actually legitimately supporting it.
I agree.
But then the UN, I mean, they're not doing anything. They're dragging their feet.
I got no issue with Trump. I mean, he couldn't have, he's come in and he's sort of jumped in head first and shown where he's at. And obviously, I just wish that, he would have been around at the time, on October 6th. I think it would have been a different situation. And we can go on there. That's not for now. I don't want to go there, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he would. I mean, if January 6th would happen on Trump's watch, there would have been bombs dropping from U.S. planes, but that didn't happen.
You're right.
I think this is the last clip, and then we'll go into Ilhan Omar and the current protests.
It took us 8 years to capture someone's by name Ibrahim Hamid, this mass murderer. 8 years he hid in a small town of Ramallah, less than 20,000 people. It took us 8 years to capture him, while he was sending suicide bombers every other day It was a big nightmare to capture him. And you know now what they are doing? Why the hostage situation that we have in Gaza? They want him. He's on the top of the list to be released. Ibrahim Hamid, remember his name? Look him up. They want mass murderers to go back to the street. And if you ask yourself, the guy that you saw earlier, Yahya Sinwar, with the child and the rifle, this guy was released just recently, part of the prisoner exchange with Israel. When Israel had to release more than 1,000 Hamas members to return one Israeli soldier back to his mother. And Hamas had a taste to that. So they thought this time they can go and bring 200 hostages and more. So they can bring the only true democracy in the Middle East to its knees. This is why it's a very brutal war. For those who are in the intelligence communities, they understand the significance of this. And they know that that Israel cannot release more Hamas terrorists. Because this guy, you saw, Yahya Sinwar, he is the mastermind behind the attacks on October 7th. And how can Israel afford, or how can any of you validate or prove the release of mass murderers back to the street so they can carry a lot more terrorist attacks and hijack an entire society, use hundreds of thousands of people as human shields? Is this our way of solving the problem? We need the correct vision. First of all, we need to identify the origins of suffering, where it's coming from. Where does it originate from? We need to identify the disease. Then we can provide the cure. Up to this point, we haven't identified the disease. And for those who know the problem, they don't have the courage to stand and say, we have a problem with Hamas. But most of us have our own calculations. From Russia to China to the rest of the superpowers, given Hamas cover. Hamas gave the attacks on October 7th as a birthday gift to Putin. For those who did not make the connection. And I don't want to go farther. Now nobody's talking about Ukraine, using Hamas as the wild card in the Middle East, igniting a religious war to just divert your attention somewhere else. All those criminals, whether they were high profile or low profile, they are all savages. They are all enemies of children and enemies of humanity. The United Nations and the rest of the international community have empowered con men who used what's so-called Palestinian cause to become richer. They were seeking power and wealth. They did not care about the Palestinian people. As the children of Gaza sink in despair and poverty, leaders of Hamas, along with their families and their entourage, enjoy the Four Seasons Hotel in Doha, Qatar.
That's it.
If we don't eradicate them.
We're gonna see that. It's gonna come out. It's gonna come out eventually. There's a gentleman, I'm sure you've seen him on Fox News. His name's Aaron Cohen. He was a former unit, select unit in the Israeli army, and he's got his own like little show, whatever, I don't know. He sounds, I mean, he knows a lot, I got to admit, and you know, he thinks there is something that Qatar is involved in a lot, I think, and we'll see down the line. This is one thing we have to keep in mind, Uriah. And I learned this actually like watching this certain news TV show in Israel, is that our enemies are very patient. They've been beaten a few times and they get knocked back, and we have these amazing successes, but it doesn't deter them. They're very patient. They just keep saying, "We'll just keep going. We'll do it a different way." So we have to be just as vigilant, in a sense, about what we're standing for and how strong we have to be, because if we lose that, then we're going to take our eye off the ball. And that's sort of what we just have to do. Like, it doesn't mean we live our lives, we be happy, we live, as God-fearing, good people, but we always know who the enemy is and what the enemy stands for, and different ways that they get at us. So,
well, the most shocking thing I saw in there, and this absolutely appalled me because I had no idea, is what he said about the terrorist organizations. I mean, I've seen all over the news that they're doing, they're having interchanges or exchanges between the prisoners. And I knew that Israel was releasing their prisoners and Hamas was releasing their prisoners, and I saw in the news that it was kind of skewed towards Hamas, that they were getting more prisoners than the Israelis were getting back. I mean, it was getting like 200, 100 of their prisoners versus every one or two of the prisoners.
But one for 1,000.
But what I didn't realize is who was getting released, and he specifically says that these leaders, these top leaders, is particularly the one that took them 10 years to finally find him, capture him. This Ben Habib or whatever his name was. They shouldn't be releasing any of those. Those shouldn't even be in the negotiation. And obviously Israel's getting forced into that by other countries that are just not backing him and say, just do it. Just do it. Just give it to them and get the hostages out of there. Or Netanyahu's getting enough pressure from the families that he's just, oh, fine, we'll just release everybody just so we can get the hostages back, because it's not good for the families. It's not good for our image. But that is shocking that they're giving those type of high-level terrorists freedom, that they're all of a sudden they're out. That's scary, because the second they get over to the other side again, like he just said, they're going to start organizing the next attack.
Right.
They're not going to sit over and say, I'm free now, I'm going to go and retire. No. It's not what's going to happen.
One of the famous things is Gilad Shalit. There's a few that we can discuss, and hostages is a big, very sore point. And honestly, it's hard to argue for and against, because there's nothing more important than getting a Jew who's stuck in a terrible situation with these terrible people, getting him out. I mean, those CIA agents, they're such geniuses. They don't get it. It's like we as much as we argue Jews with one another, we also we pray for each other. We don't want each other to suffer. So that's we'll do anything to get them out, even get rid of people that might in the future turn back and attack us. So just to get on that subject, the famous case of Gilad Shalit, one of the people that was released was Sinwar, and look what that got us. Gilad Shalit was one person. We got Sinwar for him. There was another case after the Second Lebanon War where they released a killer of a terrible human being back to Lebanon. His name was Kuntar. He had got on the beach. He had killed a little baby and the father. He killed the baby with his bare hands. And they got him, and he was in jail. And they traded him for dead bodies. They thought they were alive, and they were negotiating. And then, he was one of the people that they traded him for. And he came back to Lebanon, and there was a big gathering at the stadium, 40,000 people. He was a hero to Hezbollah. But thank God, there was justice, because I think he was fighting for the Syrian, for the Syrian government when Assad was, trying to get rid of the rebels. This was a few years back, and Israel, I think they killed him in an airstrike. So thank God they did that. But I'm just saying, that's the type of thing that these guys will do. It's terrible. It's hard to stomach. But on the other hand, the joy of seeing a hostage get back with his family is golden. I mean, it's beautiful, and it's hard, and there's just many emotions. And we're talking like humans. Uriah, we humans. We can't be so callous. So it's not easy. And that's why, I guess that's the difference between us and them. We value life so much. They value death so much.
And they're just killing everybody over there. And they kill their own people. And he expressed that they don't care who you are. They're suicide bombers who get on buses. They just indiscriminately just kill everybody. They don't care who it was. They put their own people in prisons just because they suspected something and torture and kill them. So yeah, there is no respect for life. None whatsoever. And yet we still have people over here siding with them, saying that no, that Israel's the oppressors, Israel's the occupiers. And it's such a lie. It's such a just downright evil that they would push that. And I look at the universities again, and I see that there's professors and everybody else pushing this thing, and then the people out there protesting on it, and they want to believe that. It's there's some ignorance there where they don't know one side or the other, but they're so emphatic about it that even if they knew some of the truth, they'd still be out there protesting. They'd still be on the side of Hamas because they want to believe it. They want Israel destroyed. They are against the Jewish people. They are completely anti-Semitic. And that's just not, or should not be, tolerable. And yet our universities are tolerating it. Our mayors of our cities are tolerating it. The governors are tolerating it. And not just squashing it. And I know we have freedom of speech and everything like this, and we don't want to curtail freedom of speech at all in this country, whether it's good or evil. We can't be curtailing that, but we can still push them into other areas of the community where they're not blocking our streets, they're not blocking our sidewalks, they're not blocking the economy, and we're limiting what's getting out on the media. And the media people themselves are complacent with this because they're giving them a lot of screen time. And they're just putting it out there. Just a ton of screen time where this propaganda is getting out there and it shouldn't be getting out there.
They're doing it by force. If they just did it, they said, look, okay, we'll have a debate. We'll go have a public forum debate. Okay, then debate them. We'll debate you. We'll show you, how twisted your thought is, and we're happy to sit down and give you a fair debate. Although there's a certain point, but if they are like physically doing things to disrupt, then that's a tactic that the Nazi party used in Germany. That's how they sort of got into power. It was through, scaring people.
Well, it's also done through the media. That's what it's done. They control the media, they control the news cycle, and their propaganda just wins the day because, again, the ignorance is bliss because they can push that narrative. People believe it, people push it, and they don't go out and they don't learn from themselves. And even if they did go out and learn from themselves, they'd still be out there because they want to believe it.
There's a good portion of the community, though, and those kids that are protesting that if they had a debate or something to contrast ideas with, and they were free thinkers, there's free thinking kids out there, we'd have more people with some knowledge.
Yeah, I watched the Charlie
I'm not
Kirk
saying
show and I
okay.
see what free thinkers are
Yeah,
doing, the way they argue for abortion and all this other kind of stuff. And people
right.
want to believe a certain narrative a lot of time. And again, you're right. There's going to be some of them that, oh, I didn't know that. And we might change some minds there. But there's a lot of them that they're just stone cold, and that's just what they want to believe.
Right.
Let's do this next clip here, and maybe we can get on to.
If we don't eradicate Hamas this war and this time, if we don't eradicate them, the next Gaza war is going to be deadlier. It's going to be much greater. If today we are complaining about 10,000 casualties, even though I'm not sure about the numbers because it's Hamas statistics, I don't trust anything they say or anything they do. But even if it was true, it's actually a miracle that we have only this number. The next war, we will talking about hundreds of thousands. This is the fourth war with Hamas and the fifth war in Gaza, because also Islamic Jihad had their own war. If we don't eradicate Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza this time and give Gaza back to the people of Gaza, we will give them legitimacy. We will show them that we are afraid. And tomorrow, they will come back with vengeance. What made Hamas attack this time a lot stronger than the past wars, because under the international pressure, we had to negotiate with them. And we had to give them legitimacy. This is what encouraged them and gave them power. You know, Qatar, for example, it's a member of the United Nations, playing the mediator, etc. They could have fooled me. They are the ones hosting Hamas. They are the ones who have been funding Hamas. Russia, Musa Abu Marzouk, a Hamas top leader, was in Moscow just yesterday. Okay, to be more accurate, a week ago. And here is the danger. And with this, I will conclude. The danger if Israel fail their war in Gaza, which is a brutal war, because if it was open war, Israel would annihilate Hamas in no time, matter of hours, let's say days. Hamas is finished. But since Hamas strategy, it's a strategic thing of Hamas to take human shields. This crime cannot be forgiven. None of us should forgive this crime. Gambling with children's blood for political gain, it doesn't get worse than this. So Israel now got stained by blood. This is what Hamas wanted to happen from day one. They wanted to sacrifice thousands of children so Israel can take the blame. Digging tunnels and bunkers under hospitals, schools, launching missiles. A Hamas misfire, how many people killed at a hospital, and they went so fast to blame Israel, and the rest of the world listened to them and listened to their propaganda. Nobody is concerned to check what is true and what is false. Whatever that serve our political and short-term interest, we go for it. Suicidal, not knowing that we are going against evolution. We are going against the collective consciousness of humanity. We're going against the interest of children, the defenseless children who has no one to speak on their behalf. They don't have the power to discern. And yes, they are dying. But who's causing all this death? Blame is the cheap way. It's the way of the coward. Those who have the courage take responsibility. If Hamas is not defeated, if Hamas is not eradicated in Gaza, we will set the model. We will give the freedom to so many radical groups around the world, especially in Europe. Because many of ISIS have fled to Europe under civilian cover. They are sleeping cells in Europe. And there is a migrant problem in Europe. And there is an Islamic problem in Europe. And this is just a warning. If you really care for the global security, and I speak as a person who was part of the counterterrorism effort against radical Islamists, if Hamas is not defeated in Gaza, it will inspire many groups around the globe. They will see that few thousands of savages can blackmail the international community, the superpowers, and bring democracies to their knees. Many of them are watching now, and many of them are very happy about how the world is responding. And many of them are satisfied to see the state of confusion and fear and anxiety. This is the time to get united. Because if Israel fails in Gaza, all of us, we will be next.
So to get on to this next point here is what the UN and the rest of the world are not understanding, not what they're not realizing, is if they don't let Israel completely defeat Hamas, it's going to push them. It's going to they're going to be.
We're all in danger.
Yeah, it's going to be in their doorsteps, right? Because it's going to incentivize Hamas and it's going to incentivize these other terrorist organizations to rise up and say, well, if it worked down there with only just a few people, what can we do up here? Because like we were saying just a couple clips ago, they don't see peace as peace. They see it as a weakness. And all of a sudden, what you're doing is you're displaying your vulnerability. And it incentivizes them to do more. It doesn't show them peace. It incentivizes them to do more and to attack more. So he is pretty adamant in this thing that Hamas has to be defeated. There is no choice. We have to let Israel completely defeat Hamas. Now, we hope that most of the Palestinian people survive the attacks, or that they at least give up Hamas, or they find bunkers somehow. But Hamas has to be defeated, because if it doesn't, it's going to incentivize Hezbollah, it's going to incentivize ISIS, it's going to incentivize all these other people around the world. And Europe's going to suffer the most. And I'm pretty sure the United States is going to suffer quite a bit because of how open our southern border was for the longest period of time. It's going to incentivize them to kind of up and attack and do more against everybody. Because in the end, I mean, here in the United States, we're the great Satan. We're the ones that they need to destroy. We're the Zionists over here that they want to get rid of. And so if they ever got rid of Israel, then they would just keep on going and keep on going. And like he was saying there's a huge migrant problem throughout Europe. There's a migrant problem here in the United States, and it's going to be worse next time. It's hundreds of thousands, not thousands that they were saying that was just stored there. It's going to be hundreds of thousands. And we just can't let that happen. And it looks like our leaders are being pretty complacent. I mean, Trump isn't, but there's a lot of leaders around the world that are being pretty complacent.
Right, a lot of leaders, yeah, I agree. Okay, so I'll give you my final thing on this. I mean, this is just one thing you said was complacency is what gets them, what's emboldening these people, right? Or doing these things. The way you fight this is with strength. It doesn't mean you have to always go to war, but you have to show that you're stronger, and that you are united. Those are the two things that they love, is seeing, like, for example, in the United States, where they have these, like, let's say they had riots, during the different riots that we've had over the years since I've been here. There was, Rodney King and all that. I'm not saying that was the wrong. If there was brutality on black people, there should be some sort of some sort of demonstration, peaceful, and obviously, and I think this country will fix these things, okay, as long as the wrong people aren't involved. But what I'm saying is, when they see people divided, when they see a Western country divided, that emboldens them to keep doing what they're doing, because they see weakness. When they see that there's a united front in the Western world, that they will stand up to them and will destroy them if they have to, they will back down. Okay, these are cowards. Okay, they go for women and children. They hurt you where it hurts most. Okay, they don't fight conventional war. You understand? This isn't conventional. This is all sort of terrorist proxies. They will never fight conventional wars. So they will get in your society. They will do things like that, like they're doing in Europe, and then that makes the European leaders so weak, and they're scared to really say what they really believe, or they might believe that these people are deserve to be living and behaving the way they behave. So I think that's the key here. It just boils down to that, and
that united front.
right, a united front, and honestly, I'm going to say this, that Bibi Netanyahu sort of opened that door for that when they attacked Iran, when they defeated Hezbollah, when they hurt Hezbollah. I don't know if they defeated them. I'm not. Once again, I hear conflicting results on how well they did. And therefore he opened the door for, if they would have had a united front and they would have maybe knocked out Iran, who knows what could have been. I mean, that was an opportunity. I don't know if it's totally lost. I don't know where it's at. I'm not, that's not my call. History will judge that. But I do believe that, a smaller country like Israel fighting back against Iran and hurting them, taking away their missile defenses, was a very, very strong message.
It was a pretty strong show of leadership there. I mean, and they had to do it.
And gutsy.
Gutsy, yeah, very gutsy. But Netanyahu, like we were saying, he's pretty brave on that. He's pretty bold on that. As long as he thinks he's getting the support.
Right.
But then the rest of the nation, the rest of the world, like you're saying, they've got to start standing up to Hezbollah and not, like he said, not give them legitimacy. Because the more legitimacy they give them, the more powerful they think they are, and the more bold they're going to be. The bigger the attacks, the more they're going to try to get away with. The more the trades of hostages are going to be completely one-sided.
Right.
Is their bold nature, because they think they're getting away with it. And so, well, if we can just do this little bit and get these results, if we did this big thing, then what kind of results we're going to get? And if we go in even bigger, then what kind of results we're going to get? And they're going to get bolder and bolder and bolder, because the rest of the world's just not standing up to them. And that's not going to happen. I have one other thing I want to get with you before you have to leave for the day. But on this next clip here, this is the actual one where it shows a protest up in New York. But you'll notice in the clip, there's a couple of Jews in the clip, and I want to get your opinion on this.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free out of Israel! Out of Israel! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I'm Israel fly. I'm Israel fly. I'm Israel fly.
Well, I guess it wasn't on that clip, but there was
were they,
another clip that I was watching
Hasidic,
that where there's a, and I don't know the exact terminology of the specific branch of the Jewish faith where they've got the black clothes and the phylacteries and all that kind of stuff, that they were actually amongst the Palestinians protesting.
Yes. Yes.
What's your opinion of that?
My opinion, I know that group very well. The name of the group is Neturei Karta. They actually live in Jerusalem. My son, he was living in this neighborhood that's very ultra-Orthodox is the right word, but there's a lot of different types of ultra-Orthodox Jews. This group of very small splinter group that, in fact, I'm almost 100% sure that according to all the rabbinical leaders of the Orthodox Jews, they have said that they may not be included in a group of 10 that to make what you call a group called a minyan, because they are so twisted in their belief system. And it's hard for me to watch as well, but that they've gone. But they are a splinter group from let's call them a non-Zionist group of Orthodox Jews, except they've taken it one step further. Now, I'll give you a quick overview. There are people, they even live in Israel, that say they don't believe in the state of Israel as it is because they want it to be a religious state run by like it was in the times of the Bible, where there was a king, etc., etc. And that's what we believe when the Messiah comes. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I don't know. It's a very hard thing to like talk about for a short period of time, but it's a belief system, and then so these people say, not only are we gonna like not believe in it. Now you can be like sort of passive about it. You say, look, I'm living in this country. I don't believe this is how the state should be, but you know, I'm still living here and I'm paying my taxes and doing what I should do. But these people take it a step further and then they go and support the other side. That's twisted. Like, I think some of them went to Arafat's hospital bed to go wish him well. Like, that's twisted. Some of them went to meet the supreme leader of Iran. That's like totally twisted, you know? So someone said to me, maybe they're in the Mossad and they like, that's how they integrate. I don't believe that. But I think that's what it is. It's a small splinter group of people that have taken it a step too far. And, you know, it's just like we just don't, I can't pay attention to them. It's hard to watch, but I can't pay attention to them.
Well, there's a lot of
unfortunately,
news media
happens
here that are now interviewing them and making like this is a big thing. Look, even Jews are against what's going on over there. Even the Jewish people are against Netanyahu and what he's doing, and it's making that small splinter group that you're saying appear a lot bigger than they really are.
We've seen the same thing in the Christian community of these offshoots of really crazy people doing crazy things in the name of Christianity.
So I'm sad to
Right.
see that
I
too.
mean,
They should be out there doing that, but that's where what's happening.
right.
And
Here's the deal. The deal is that there's splinter groups on everything. Let's just say if we said there was 60% or 70% of Muslims believe that they just want to live in peace and don't want to harm anyone, etc., etc. And we'd say, yeah, we believe him, but the 30% are just wacky, crazy, like they want to destroy everything in their path. So that makes them look bad. Right now, you've got two or three go to this march wearing this garb and do crazy, march with the Palestinians, and the media wants to go and interview them. But we can't stop them, but people have to just have the right, thought. Like, is that normal? Like, does that just because they hate Bibi, they hate any leader of Israel. I don't know who they would like. So that's just who they are. They twisted. Unfortunately, it's very hard for me to say it. I'm not like I'm sad. It saddens me. But let's just get back to like a normal thought process. A Jewish person that is, that's living in America and believes that he's a Jew and is proud to be Jewish. I don't care what his belief is in God, like how religious he is. After October 7th, has to feel some pain and suffering for what happened, and cannot look at those Palestinians and say, maybe I should go march with them. It's just, it just can't be. It's like if you went to a football game or basketball game and the US were playing the Soviet Union, and you would support the Soviet Union, like in the old days. You wouldn't, even if you couldn't stand every player on that team, you would have said, I still have to back the US, right? It's the same, it's a sort of similar thing. Like, if you got a Jewish soul, you will always, my belief is there's always a Jewish soul in every Jew. Then you want to really sort of just be very, you're sensitive, you're in pain. You're pained by all this, and those people, I don't know what they're thinking.
Well, then the other part of that clip was this whole Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, and most of those were the actual Palestinians, and you can see that there are Muslim people in there that are chanting that. But again, it's not about Palestine being free, because they were free. Gaza was set up, Gaza was done, the West Bank was done. They had freedom to do whatever they want. There was trade going back and forth between Gaza and Israel. There was business going back and forth, and they chose to disrupt that. So there was some freedom there. And back when Yasser Arafat was there, they allowed them to set up their own government and to establish their own way of doing things over there. They weren't being ruled by the Israelis anymore, the Israeli government anymore. And so they had the peace, and yet we see purposely that they disrupted that, because again, it's not about their own state, it's not about peace, it's about from the river to the sea. That's what
their actions speak louder than their words.
Yeah, that's what they want.
Right.
I hate to lose you here, so let's show the beautiful Ilhan Omar.
What we are seeing in Gaza is another heartbreaking, unconscionable escalation. Netanyahu has shuttered the ceasefire agreement, indiscriminately killing hundreds of people in Gaza and putting the lives of the remaining hostages at risk. This is after not allowing food, water, aid, or fuel into Gaza for 3 weeks. But it's sadly not surprising. We know Netanyahu has a reckless disregard for civilian lives. We know that Netanyahu has actively sabotaged hostage deals. And we know Netanyahu wants to continue committing war crimes with the full backing of the United States. Netanyahu and his government are now responsible for the murder of over 50,000 Palestinians in the last 16 months. He now has a plan for a ground invasion to fully occupy Gaza. How can we expect Netanyahu's government to stop the mass killings of civilians if we continue to supply the weapons used to carry it out? Palestinians have endured decades of occupation, displacement, apartheid, watching their dreams of self-determination and dignity grow more distant with every American-backed escalation. While our government has allowed the Israeli government to kill innocent civilians with impunity, it hurts our standing with the world with every passing day. How can we allow families to be massacred before our eyes while children beg for their lives? How can we allow hospitals, schools, refugee camps to be bombed? How can we allow aid workers to be massacred? How can we allow ethnic cleansing to continue? We have a moral responsibility to stop providing military aid to Netanyahu's war machine and campaign of terror.
I believe that Ilhan Omar is a Palestinian operative. It's like I think it's all sort of, I don't want to say, yeah, it's all like synchronized. They attack and they do their thing. And then she is dressed up all smart and, well, sort of well-spoken. I wouldn't call her well, but she's got a good script writer. And she's trying to, say these poor Palestinians. And it's brilliant. It's a brilliant plan, I must say. She uses ethnic cleansing and all these great words that were used when the Jews were killed, but she's flipped it. And people are stupid enough to believe her. So hopefully we will be a bit smarter, because it's hilarious to watch. I mean,
she's using a lot of false information there too, because she's purposely saying that Netanyahu is the one that violated the ceasefire, when that's not true. They had an agreement to release so many of the prisoners there, and the Palestinians didn't do it. The Hamas didn't do it. They didn't follow it, which is why Trump was issuing those demands that you have until noon on that specific Saturday to release them, and they still didn't do it. They are the ones that were violating the ceasefire agreement, because they weren't sticking to the trade agreement between the prisoners. And Netanyahu went and says, well, we're going to have to go in there and get them. And then Ilhan Omar here is saying, well, he's purposely going to do a ground invasion and he's going to occupy Gaza. No, that's not what happened either. He said physically, we've got to go in and get the prisoners and get them out of there. He's never once said we're going to occupy Gaza, and he would never occupy Gaza, because the rest of the world would be against that, and he'd lose the political fight there. But he's got to get his prisoners out there, and yet she's like saying, well, they're not letting food and water in there, they're not letting the Palestinians do this. And then she's like, she used a specific word, they're occupying our area, and Israel's not occupying Gaza, not occupying the West Bank. So it goes back to where she is just like the protesters saying from the river to the sea, because she's saying the exact same thing. They're doing the exact same thing you said, that she's a Palestinian operative. They want from the river to the sea. They want them out. And Ilhan Omar is included in that. They want all of them out. And it's completely not fair, the lies she's saying. But, again, that's the rhetoric that she wants to throw out there, because people believe it. And people want to believe that, just like you were saying.
The fate of free societies is tied to their willingness to fight the scourge of anti-Semitism. For anti-Semitism legitimizes and unleashes wanton violence against a part of human society just because of the identity of its members. Not because of anything they do, but because of who they are. And once this principle is practiced on one group, it has no limits. 80 years ago, this deadly virus destroyed a third of the Jewish people. Its virulent mutations under the Nazis claimed the lives of millions more, until it was stamped out by unrelenting allied military force. Now this hatred has reemerged. It has reemerged through its radical Islamist carriers in Yemen, Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, and elsewhere. These anti-Semites wish to destroy not only the Jewish state, they seek to destroy the forces of modernity in the Arab and Muslim world. They seek to drag it back to a primitive and violent medievalism. Nowhere was this fanaticism better demonstrated than on October 7th. The Hamas monsters who attacked us on that day beheaded our men, raped our women, and burnt our babies. They took 251 innocent people hostage, including grandmothers, including their grandchildren. We brought back 196 of these hostages, 147 of them alive. We are determined to bring all of them home. But here's what we learned that day, for those who needed to learn it. We learned that if they could, these savage Hamas killers would murder all of us, down to the last man, woman, and child. And this hatred, as Chancellor Scholz of Germany told me, he said, they're not different from the Nazis. They're exactly the same as the Nazis. That is true. But today, the Jewish people are in a different position from where we were on the eve of the Holocaust. Yet as we win the war against the forces of anti-Semitism in the Middle East, the fires of anti-Semitism rage in the heart of Western civilization. They rage in Europe's capitals, in the Western press, in social media. They rage in America's elite universities. I went to one of them. I can't believe that in Boston, in Cambridge, in MIT, where I went to school, in nearby Harvard, in Columbia and New York, and elsewhere, people are demonstrating with passion. These ignorant demonstrators. Who are they demonstrating for? For these murderers, these rapists, these mass killers. This is a reflection of a deep rot that has pervaded the intellectual hub of free societies. And this vilification of Israel, the Jewish people, and Western values has been propagated by a systemic alliance between the ultra-progressive left and radical Islam. It must be resolutely fought by civilized societies to safeguard their future. This is why we must all commend President Trump's decisive actions against anti-Semitism, and we must pressure other governments to do the same. I was recently in Washington, where I met President Trump, but I took time to meet 50 Jewish students, the leaders of tomorrow. They told me how they were being harassed on campus, violently harassed. One student told me that he was facing the dean of the university, who invited one of the Hamas killers to give a lecture in an elite American university. And I said, well, what are you doing about it? He said, I'm suing him. I said, good for you. This is exactly what you should be doing.
Right. What was I going to say? This is the whole thing. Netanyahu is an easy guy to attack. One, because he's more on the right-wing side. He's got a right-wing coalition, which is a more like hardline. So they can say he's he's a bad guy. He wants to destroy the Palestinians and et cetera, et cetera. He wants to, wipe them out. And he's also, so he's easy to attack, and he's he is, the whole narrative is so brilliant. It's so easy to put together. But I'll say something. If you look at Israeli prime ministers, some of them, they were bigger generals than Netanyahu. Yitzhak Rabin was the chief of staff. Ehud Barak was a chief of staff. Arik Sharon was also like a top general that was a hero. So, Netanyahu was in a great unit and all that. He was in a special unit, and his brother was a hero that died saving the hostages in Entebbe. But they're just so good at this. Their propaganda is brilliant. It's brilliant. I mean, and she stands in front of the camera and she can lie with a straight face. So she is a great tool for this whole narrative, and that's what it is. And she's also getting a salary from the American government, which is very sad. It's very sad. Now, I'm not saying she shouldn't be allowed to speak, but the fact that she's in a decision-making role in our government is pretty scary.
Well, that has to do with
I want
Obama,
everyone
because
to agree on stuff.
Yeah, the whole reason why she's even in there has to do with Obama, because they took all those refugees over, and they just started putting those refugees everywhere, and they put them here in Utah. I know a whole refugee camp here in Utah, and this whole complex, and Detroit got a ton of the refugees, and Wisconsin, Minnesota got a ton of the refugees, but they got so many of them that it flipped complete voter blocks, and that's how she got voted in, is because of all these refugees that they brought over. Then they legalized and made them immediate citizens, and then all of a sudden now they're voting in people like this.
They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
What's your opinion on Trump saying that he's going to take over Gaza and
put up some hotels?
Redevelop it and let the Palestinians back in. What's your opinion of that comment?
Well, I had a different idea. I thought that Israel should, after they've sort of got rid of the militants, should sell it to the UAE and let them build like these beautiful buildings and make it into like an economic haven. Because they'll make sure that the bad guys. I mean, okay, there was an attack in the UAE on a Chabad rabbi, but for the most part, I've had friends. I'm not I wouldn't want to go there, but I've had friends that have gone there, and there's communities of Jews, and they allow you to pray, and they sort of allow everyone to be who they are, and they do have probably very religious Muslims. But their whole the whole thing is just they got a big, this big country that is like an economic haven, and that's what drives them. It's not the religion, and they still run it probably with an iron fist, but they don't allow the bad guys to rule. So that's what I would do. I would just sell it to the UAE for $1 and say, go ahead, develop it, and whenever you make a few bucks, you can pay us. But Trump's idea is sort of similar, so I kind of like it. I like what his idea is. I think it's a genius idea, and please God it happens. I mean, it will change the whole region,
Well, I really hope it does happen, because that would change the entire region. I mean, it would eliminate Israel from liability, because then the rest of the world couldn't look at Israel and say, "Oh, you're annihilating the Palestinians, you're pushing them out." It put the burden on the United States, and we could handle that burden, and we could redevelop that, because, like you said, it's a wasteland right now. It's completely destroyed. There's nothing but rubble there. People cannot legitimately live there. I don't even think in half the places there's even running water anymore. There's no food getting in there unless they truck it in. It just
Yeah, and
needs to
Hamas
be
kills it.
redeveloped. And so I think
Hamas
it would
steals
work
it.
if the world community would let them do it.
Two partners like the UAE would be one of them, and I would say, let's look. It's a beautiful land. It's got potential. It's right by the beach. They can make beautiful. I mean, America can invest. I don't know. I don't. America doesn't want to be like a colonizer. That's not like a. But they could invest and make it into put money into it and make sure that they run it with an iron fist in the sense that they don't let the bad guys in. And let me tell you, it will be very successful. And the truth is, they should offer the bad guys to leave the Gaza Strip. Say, you want to leave, you can go now. If you want to stay and build this up, let's do it, because it will become an amazing thing. And it doesn't mean, and that will obviously be good for Israel, because Israel will just, they'll benefit economically. And I mean, it's too simple to be good, to be true. You know what I'm saying? It's a simple idea, but it's very good.
Well,
thank you for your insights and your knowledge and your perspectives, and pointing out a perspective that I didn't look at, some things that you said. And we really hope that we can get this information out to more people. So share it yourself, and if we've touched your hearts to some insight, please share these, share the clips, follow us, like us on all the platforms that you watch your podcasts on, and let us know what else you'd like us to speak on.
Perfect. Yeah, I greatly appreciate your time, Selwyn. We're gonna close up here and by saying a few words here.
Do this. I must say, I really enjoyed it. So thanks a lot. I appreciate you thinking of me, Uriah.
Not a problem. You'll see us up on YouTube, and hopefully we get a lot of attention off of this, and hopefully it changes minds. I mean, that's what we really hope.
Yeah.
We hope it changes at least
that's
some
all
minds.
you want. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Have a good weekend, and have a Shabbat Shalom, as I say, a peaceful Sabbath.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Take care, guys.
Well, Ingrid, that was quite the conversation we were able to have with him, and he had a lot of insights that a lot of people probably hadn't thought about.
We all need that perspective. I loved him. What a great man. He touched my heart.
And having the insights he had on stuff that we as Americans, we just don't consider, because again, we're kind of sheltered. We live in this little shelter and underneath this bubble, and we don't consider how dangerous things could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad to say that we're probably going to find out, just because of how open that border was, that at some point here in the near future, things are going to happen. Knowing how the world works and how the world thinks, they're going to get emboldened, because as much as they should be back in Israel and not giving Hamas legitimacy, it's going to happen.
I saw a lot of foreshadowing too. We get. I'm not saying we have it as bad as they do, but I hear it a lot where it's down with Christianity and that we're bad people, and I can see that coming.
Yeah, and we're going to have our own October 6th sooner or later. It's going to happen. So again, we hope that everybody was able to pick up some stuff from this call or from this podcast, and see what we're trying to do on God and country, bring God back into things, look at it from their perspective as well as our perspective, kind of get out of our own little shadows, our own little box, our own little protective box that we here in the United States, and look at it from their point of view. Again, if we were sitting on a border that dangerous, where they could come across at any moment and start killing our families, we'd be putting up a bigger fight for them than we are right now. But we're sitting here where we're well protected. We're significantly bigger with them. I mean, the entire country of Israel is, 7 miles wide?
Wow.
So when they say river to the sea, they're talking several miles. I mean, we could jog 7 miles and go across the entire country of Israel. So it wouldn't take much of a push from the West Bank or any place else to kind of completely annihilate the country of Israel. So they have to be very guarded. They have to be very protective. Their Mossad infrastructure's got to be there because they got about 1,000.
What
They
a courageous
cannot make a
people.
mistake.
And we need to have more courage. We need to be inspired by the courage they've taken to protect their way of living, their religion, their land, their people.
And we got to stand up for them.
Yeah.
More than we are. Much, much more than we are. And again, thanks to the Danny Jones show for that clip. But when they say river to the sea, or when they're trying to separate the government of Israel from Judaism, the religion, they're really trying to have an excuse to go against them defending themselves. And there is no excuse for them not to be able to defend themselves, because we won't give a second thought to that defense. If someone came up from Mexico and annihilated San Diego, it would be a full-out war, just like it was on September 11th, where they hit our buildings. It was, our country was united, and it was a full-on war. Someone's going to pay for this. This is not going to go unnoticed. This is not going to go on without some kind of recompense. I mean, and every U.S. citizen was behind that. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter who we were behind that. And they have the same thing. I mean, they're significantly smaller and more vulnerable because they are completely surrounded. And they mentioned here, too, in one of those quotes, that our U.S. military say it's very, very difficult to fight a two-front war. Well, they're almost in a three-front war with Syria and Hezbollah at the front. They've got Palestinians and to the east, and then they got Gaza to the south there. They're really sandwiched. They're in a very precarious predicament that could go south so quickly. And anything that goes south costs lives. It's innocent citizens on their side that would be instantly killed because they're pushing right up to their borders in their neighborhoods and their communities. There's no buffer there of just raw ground sitting anywhere where you could put tanks and stuff like that and kind of protect the borders. It's the border of Gaza, and then there's neighborhoods. It's the border, north border with Syria and Hezbollah, and then there's neighborhoods. And if people like that came into your neighborhood, you'd think twice about that as well. So,
yeah, like you said, there's miracles, because the fact that they've been able to, as small as they are, withstand and win so many attacks is, God has to be behind those people.
well, just like the son of Hamas said, this is going on the fourth, fifth war, and they've won every
It's
single
incredible.
one of them. And with minimal loss, too. I mean, October 6th was horrible because those teenagers, those kids getting killed, babies getting kidnapped and killed. But yet, it could have been so much worse. So much worse.
Yeah.
Well, again, this is God and Country. We greatly appreciate you guys listening to our podcast. And we hope, again, you share it, like it. We want to get the subscriptions up and get the shares up. So, again, it would support the channel, obviously. But we're here to change minds. We're here to change hearts. And the more people that can see this and understand these perspectives, the better it is going to be for our society. So in addition to supporting the channel, get the word out so that people can actually see this and look at it from a different perspective, look at it from their perspective, and hopefully we can change some hearts. We can, like we said last week, show some courage and actually stand up for what is right.
Right.
Next week, we're going to have a special guest on here named Trevor Lee. He's right here from our Utah legislature, so look forward to that, and we will talk to everybody next week.
See you then.